Soon as he was born, he was thrown into the Styx River, but until he lost consciousness, no one came to his aid. The main culprit was his own cruel father, who stood on the bank and laughed arrogantly. It turned out that this was a challenge of the Baskerville family. All newborn babies had to crawl over sharp architectural structures with their bare hands before they could reach the mirror to receive the baptism with the water of the Styx River. In his previous life, he was the strongest hunting dog of the family. To be acknowledged by the family and his father, he did all their dirty work, killing countless enemies. He also made a great contribution when the demon tribe invaded, but his reward for defeating the demons and returning to the family in glory was to be sent to the guillotine by his own father, simply because his power could threaten his father's position, and he knew too many secrets he shouldn't have known. Unexpectedly, despite his loyalty to the family, he was falsely accused of colluding with the demons. If heaven gave him another chance, he would definitely destroy this vile family with his own hands, but he didn't expect to be able to return to his childhood. There were many other children like him by his side. All of them were the result of the Baskerville family's efforts to consolidate their position. They selected newborn babies from various families to observe and test. Through these challenges, they would become secret assassins serving the family. In his previous life, he was one of them. Since he was the illegitimate son of the family head and another woman, his status was almost no different from a servant. That's why in his previous life, he fought tirelessly and did the dirtiest work, with the reason for his loyalty being his desire for recognition from the family and Hugo, his father. But no matter how hard he tried, he was never acknowledged, and was even falsely accused of colluding with the demon tribe and sentenced to death. Before his death, he swore that after biting his prey to death, he would never live as a hunting dog again. But now heaven has given him this opportunity, and he will definitely overthrow the Baskerville family from the throne. At this moment, he has been reborn, lying among the newborn babies of the Baskerville family. While the other babies were crying loudly, he remained completely silent, and his abnormality caught the attention of the men. They took him to a separate testing area. His first challenge was the sword path. His task was to crawl across thousands of blood-stained swords stuck into the ground. For him, who had been reborn, this was as easy as turning his hand over. The second challenge at the Styx Lake was also quite special. The longer he soaked, the stronger the blessing he would receive. So this time, he had to try his best to endure longer in the river. Only then could he become stronger than his previous life. Soon, his tender hands were covered in wounds. After crawling through the swords, he plunged straight into the river. He silently thought that even if he lost consciousness completely, he would never give up. The man watched him. The little baby was able to endure in the Styx River for up to 7 minutes. He immediately laughed madly. When Hugo called him out, he disobeyed and tried to absorb every last drop. As he mumbled that he had to endure and gradually lost consciousness, the man finally pulled him out of the river. When he woke up, he was back in this dark nursery. Now he had a better starting point than his previous life. This time, he would definitely destroy all those who betrayed him. But then the maid placed an exquisite gift box in front of his bed. In his previous life, he had never received a gift. Sure enough, 2 poisonous snakes slowly crawled out of the box. It seemed that someone in the family was extremely jealous of his talent and wanted to use the poisonous snakes to eliminate him. But if left unchecked, the snakes would kill all the newborns. So he quickly grabbed the 2 poisonous snakes. They would be the start of his revenge. He then tore both snakes apart. The one behind this was Hugo's wife. She wanted to eliminate potential rivals to her son. Moreover, he was just an illegitimate child. The next day, the Baskervilles were utterly astonished to witness a baby sleeping soundly next to the dead bodies of 2 vipers. That day, the maid was tortured and executed, but in the end, no one knew the reason behind the death of the 2 vipers. Only he knew the truth, but his heart grew colder. 8 years passed quickly, and then he and all the youths who passed the challenges were gathered. For education, he learned that in this world, magic coexists with swordsmanship. Swordsmen are divided into 4 levels based on strength: apprentice swordsman, proficient swordsman, graduate swordsman, and master swordsman. The strongest in the family is his father, whose swordsmanship has now reached the pinnacle. the Sword King, the supreme sword. In his previous life, due to his lowly status, he could hardly be supported by the family's sword aura, so until his death, he was no match for Hugo. Now, the three frail triplets next to him looked at him with unpleasant eyes. Sure enough, after class, they cornered him in a small room. They were not satisfied with his achievement in the Styx River. Unfortunately, they wanted to verify the rumors themselves. However, he clearly remembered these three blonde triplets. In his previous life, they also participated in falsely accusing him and hunting him down with others in the family, so he would indulge them in a little game. Immediately, he bit off the hand of the blonde boy covering his mouth. They stood there in shock and fear. Seeing their confused looks, he coldly said, "This taste isn't bad. Didn't you just say you would eat your own hand?" Those words made one of the blonde boys cry, but suddenly, one of them drew a dagger and stabbed him straight in the stomach. However, he had now received blessings from the Styx River. Coupled with 8 years of relentless training, an ordinary dagger couldn't harm him at all. The blonde boy was surprised that despite being older, he couldn't do anything to him. However, in this family, age means nothing, strength is everything. However, before the blonde boy could react, he gripped the dagger-wielding hand and said with an evil look, "Let's play this game to the end, my dear brothers." Then he threw the dagger in front of them. "Only one of you can leave here. Who will it be? Let's see if your brotherly bond can overcome death." As he predicted, those three scumbags started fighting each other, their relationship completely shattered. But this incident reached the family head Hugo. After the butler reported that the Morgor family was demanding their ruby mine, and that the young master vicar ranked first in the written exam, he then mentioned the fight between the young masters. No one died, but one of the triplets had all his teeth completely destroyed. Another had a sunken jaw, and the remaining one lost his left index finger. The one who caused them to fight each other was the young master vicar. So Hugo summoned him, praised him for maturing a lot, and asked about the injuries he inflicted on the three of them. However, he remained indifferent to the family head's question, as he didn't feel he did anything wrong. The three had been treated. Hugo said it wasn't about their physical condition, but his actions had caused the three brothers to become suspicious of each other. They even stopped eating together or talking to one another. Hugo was displeased, saying their combined three fragrances used to be a work of art, but because of him, they had developed emotional cracks. Hugo also said his brothers had arrived before him. They had already generously forgiven him, but he arrogantly and coldly said, "Forgive me? I believe forgiveness is no better than an apology from the weak who cannot take revenge." His arrogant voice echoed through the living room. Hearing this, Hugo burst into maniacal laughter, for those were the very words he had spoken in his previous life. He said that strength is justice, meaning to be weak is a sin, and he praised him for fully understanding the family's motto. He then ordered the butler to go to the food storage and let him take whatever he wanted to eat. He only smiled and asked for chocolate. Before he left, Hugo also instructed him to perform well in the midterm evaluation exam, not to lose to anyone from the main house. He agreed. With the family head's permission, he went to the storage with the butler. However, despite the abundant goods and the butler's introduction of various chocolates, he only wanted to take some cocoa beans. This surprised the butler and others, but soon after, they gave him a full bag of red beans, which were blood beans, a type of cocoa with an extremely alluring aroma. The beans in front of him smelled delicious, truly very bitter like coffee beans. The butler secretly thought he must really like chocolate to be able to eat those raw blood beans, and figured the young master vicar was calculating the clan leader's words, only attracting attention when he could be acknowledged. So he came up with the idea of eating a lot of chocolate to gain more stats. Receiving the blood beans, his heart ignited. This would be very useful for him in the exam in 5 days. On that day, an unprecedented, major incident would occur at the Baskerville family. His family was called the Clan of Madmen by the world, and the children born there would be rigorously educated, having to climb a very steep mountain to train their physical endurance right after learning to walk, and were not allowed to rest outside the designated times. When going to sleep, they had to sleep with the corpse of a monster or a small demon to adapt to the harsh environment. When that stage ended, they would be 8 years old, and the young hunting dogs would have to face extremely horrific evaluations and challenges. The reason why the Baskerville family is called the Clan of Madmen is because of this practical evaluation, this soul examination. Very soon, the survival exam arrived. Today was the day he had long awaited. This would be an important step to defeat the Baskerville family. The survival exam is the final round for the family to select assassins. In the Baskerville family, everyone undergoes tortures from a young age. Fighting monsters or climbing cliffs, it's all routine. And this exam will determine their rankings. They must survive a month in the monster-filled mountains behind. The scoring criteria are also very simple. They'll get 10 points for successfully rescuing someone, 30 points if they rescue that person without serious injury, 50 points for surviving by eliminating another young master, 70 points for hunting a demon and surviving, and finally, they'll get 90 points if they meet all the previous conditions. But there are no perfect scores. However, taking another examinee's emblem on their clothes will earn bonus points. Perhaps that condition was for a perfect score. The examiners also warned them not to leave the forbidden area of the mountains. There were extremely powerful monsters out there. Even they weren't sure they could escape safely. Only within the forbidden area were the demons they had tamed, so it would be safer. The guide dogs, or guardian knights, would secretly score them during the exam period. When the examiners gave the start signal, the exam officially began, and the young masters rushed to find advantageous positions. The examiners quietly thought, this exam doesn't encourage killing others, but it's not forbidden either. As there will be point deductions for killing, so they will try to avoid killing with their own hands. With the guide dogs watching over, everything should be ensured. In the following days, everyone used all means to take emblems, but he was different, calmly strolling through the dangerous mountains. While others desperately fought monsters, he leisurely grilled small fish, dug holes, hunted for food, and gathered firewood. But everything he did was just to make the secret observers let their guard down. Then he switched to observing others. Sure enough, that guy got bored thinking he had no intention of escaping, so he left. Sensing the lurking gaze disappear, he sneered and headed into the forbidden area. Now his real hunt was beginning. As he ventured deeper into the forbidden area, there were many burnt trees and blackened ground. It seemed the monster he needed to hunt was nearby. Sure enough, after a while, he felt a scorching hot gust of wind on his face. He smiled and said, "Hellhound, I've been looking for you for a long time." Looking at the hellhound before him, the fighting spirit that had been dormant in him awoke. He thought silently, "Come, monster, let me test my current strength on you." Just now, he had finally found the B-rank hellhound, but at 8 years old, he could already face it head-on. Before coming here, he had studied books about hellhounds, so he understood their weaknesses. He had also set up many traps around to ensure success. The first weakness of hellhounds is that they can only move in a straight line. They need quite a long time to change direction. The second weakness is that these creatures cannot cross water. No matter how little, in this situation the hellhound will be slowed down. Moreover, these monsters have the habit of opening their mouths while running. Additionally, all canine beasts have a fatal weakness, which is what he got from the storage, blood beans. This can produce 100 liters of chocolate from just one bean. Blood beans can replenish their energy, but for the canine beast race, it is a deadly poison. Soon after, he stuffed the blood bean into its mouth. After eating it, even the hellhound collapsed as if severely injured. Even the hellish monster couldn't withstand that tiny blood bean, because it would affect the hellhound's heart and stomach, areas protected by ribs, so they're very sturdy. Clearly, dissecting a hellhound is also an art. Its whole body is as hard as steel. Ordinary blades can't cut it. Ordinary blades can't harm it at all. But the unprotected waist area containing the kidneys is its weakness. Perhaps it's similar to him. After killing monsters, a pure energy crystal called a Trian Gaia will emerge from their bodies. Absorbing that energy will enhance their physical abilities. If he continues killing monsters in the forbidden area, his strength will soar. Moreover, killing this B-rank monster, he'll definitely top the survival exam. He wonders what Hugo will do when he sees an 8-year-old killing such a dangerous monster. After achieving first place, he'll definitely force Hugo to give him what he never had in his previous life, the forbidden item. Before the others in the family know its true value, he must quickly obtain it. But at this moment, strange sounds came from behind. There were too many hellhounds here. Well then, he won't be polite. He still had many blood beans with no idea where to use them. But at this moment, the pack of hellhounds showed signs of fear. These hellish monsters would never fear any human. There could only be one reason for their terror: the appearance of a more terrifying monster stronger than them. Indeed, behind him, a dreadful specter was emerging. No wonder the hellhounds were so afraid. Behind him appeared an S-rank monster, the three-headed dog Cerberus. Cold sweat poured from him. Why would such a high-ranked monster appear here? Shouldn't it be deep within the forbidden area? But at this moment, the wounds on Cerberus caught his attention. Its body had many arrows deeply embedded. Perhaps someone was hunting it, so it fled from the depths of the forbidden area. That's right, above the monster mountains was the land of the barbarian tribe. It seems this Cerberus was being hunted by the nomads. Now that it was severely injured, wasn't this a golden opportunity for him to kill it? In the past 8 years, he had never shown his true prowess. But in reality, his swordsmanship had reached the pinnacle, far surpassing many adult hunters in the family. So facing a severely injured S-rank monster, he could still fight and defeat it. Come, let him test the true power of a high-ranked monster. The next moment, 2 terrifying forces exploded. But after all, it was an S-rank monster far beyond him. Its monstrous power shattered his sword and sent him flying far away. Fortunately, his swordsmanship skills were honed to perfection, with no wasted movements when killing the enemy, and he had received blessings from the river Styx, making his physique extremely powerful. Moreover, it was also severely injured. Otherwise that blow could have torn off his arm. He had underestimated it, so it had wounded his arm, drawing blood, and he realized that in this situation, a direct confrontation was no longer a wise choice. If he sustained further injuries, he would die. He had to flee and lure it into the trap he had previously set to deal with the hellhounds. He turned and fled frantically, but the three-headed Cerberus chased him more fiercely. At the critical moment of life and death, it fell into his trap. In the trap, he had prepared countless swords soaked in bloodbean essence to deal with the hellhounds. Falling into it, even Cerberus would find it hard to survive. For being canines, neither Cerberus nor the hellhounds expected him to use this trap in the end. Even more unexpected, on this trip he could kill an S-rank monster. But befitting an S-rank monster, despite being hit by many bloodbean essences, it was still breathing. Well then, let him give it the most deserving final blow. A wooden arrow flew swiftly from his hand towards it. After that strike, it still continued advancing towards him. But the previous arrow contained the venom of a blood python, rumored to kill anyone it poisoned after 7 steps. It was no rumor. After 7 steps the three-headed Cerberus collapsed before him. After absorbing its energy, his strength soared. He felt himself becoming more powerful. However, the benefits from an S-rank monster went beyond that. Such monsters were definitely guardians of some secret place. Those secret places were often called dungeons, containing countless treasures. Now that the guardian was dead, how could he miss this golden opportunity? However, to ensure safety, he still used soil with Cerberus scent to smear on himself. This would help him avoid engaging with lower-ranked beasts. After a deep search, he finally found a mysterious cave entrance. From the emanating energy, this was certainly the dungeon that monster had guarded. He remembered visiting here in his previous life, but back then this dungeon was already empty. But now it was different. He could smell the stench of rot mixed with mana, certainly untouched by anyone. Looking at the cave entrance before him, he felt anxious and excited. What wondrous treasures awaited his discovery inside? As he stepped through the dark cave, a brilliantly red-lit entrance appeared. Inside, he saw a glowing red ruby stone emanating an evil energy. But the shattered corpse by the wall immediately caught his attention. It seemed someone had been here before. Looking at the shape of the corpse, with wounds all over its body, it appeared to have been slashed randomly by a blade, and the blood had dried up, suggesting this corpse had been here for quite some time. He picked up an old paper lying in front of the dead body. Seeing the familiar recorded content, it seemed the owner of these bones was also a member of the Baskerville family. The letter recorded what that person had experienced. The letter read, "At this moment, my name is no longer important, so it can be anything. I will call myself Son. I see no need to stain this clean paper with my real name. I am recording this, so that those who come after will not make the same mistake as I did." The legends in our family spoke of this place being an ancient dungeon, and my brother, Abel, accidentally discovered it. We tried countless times to explore this dungeon. We slew countless monsters and reached this ruby chamber, where we encountered the ultimate question here, and it was this question that held us back for a very long time. For 3 whole years, he discarded the old letter and looked at the ruby stone, pondering those 3 years. They must have craved the treasure greatly. He looked at the inscription on the ruby stone's pedestal. What enters as 1, yet becomes 2 inside, can only leave when it is 1 again. Then he continued reading the letter. With our limited understanding of that phrase, my brother and I pondered it for a very long time, and we both came to the same conclusion: we were twins. In our mother's womb we were once 1, but upon being born, we became 2. One of the 2 of us, only one could leave with the treasures we obtained, right? That also meant, after a prolonged and brutal battle, I killed my own brother. Now there is only 1 person left here. But even so, nothing has changed. Now the 2 of us have become 1, but I still haven't received anything. I killed my younger brother. I killed him. I killed him. After immense regret, I decided to leave this place. If anyone has the courage to come here, I want to tell that person one thing: leave this place immediately. All this place does is drive people insane with greed. There is nothing to take from this cursed cave. He summarized that the point was it was useless to come here. There was nothing to take, but even if he came alone, the riddle remained unchanged, meaning those 2 brothers had answered the riddle incorrectly. He pondered what the correct answer could be, but as he looked down at the corpse, he felt the answer was right before his eyes. That person seemed quite unlucky, but he, as the main character, would naturally have more luck. Looking back at the red ruby on the pedestal, he suddenly understood the answer. He became more certain of the answer in his mind. When we enter, we are 1 with the dark tunnel. But upon arriving here, the red light shines, along with his shadow, making 2 figures. So when the red light disappears, he will become 1 again. So the answer to that riddle is his own shadow. Thinking this, he crushed the red ruby on the pedestal. In the next moment, an extremely evil power erupted furiously on the pedestal. When the light returned, the ruby had transformed into a sword brimming with terrifying power. He never expected to find this holy relic here. The inscription on the stone had also changed. It turned out this sword was forged from the body of a great evil demon. This sword was named Beelzebub, and only members of the Baskerville family could wield it. It seemed the legendary story was indeed true. According to legend, in ancient times there was an extremely powerful group of demons that invaded this land. They were called the 7 deadly sins of the great evil formless demons. At that time, the leaders of the 7 great clans confronted the 7 demon kings. Among them, the chief of the Baskervilles defeated the gluttonous demon fly, Beelzebub. And from then on, what remained of Beelzebub was sealed within the Baskerville territory. Who would have thought the remnants of this monster's corpse would be forged into a magic sword? It is said that in a previous life, this sword fell into the hands of an evil demon and brought death to countless human warriors. Now it belongs to him. But when he grasped it, it flowed into his arm. Then a demonic sword grew out of his right hand. This only made him more excited. Having obtained the magic sword forged from the body of a great formless sin demon, combined with countless experiences from his previous life, he truly wondered how powerful he would become this time. After acquiring the magic sword, he thoroughly explored the entire area, making sure there was nothing left before leaving. But suddenly, a fierce hunger caused him to collapse to the ground. Why was he so hungry? No, it was precisely this magic sword that was now thirsting for blood beyond his endurance. But the fact that it could directly affect his body made him even more astonished, because this sword truly had a consciousness of its own. But at this moment, the magic sword pulled him to continue running. Not long after, he found the corpse of Cerberus that he had just killed. After absorbing its essence of blood, he gained the special skill Beelzebub's hunger. Unexpectedly, this magic sword could also steal the opponent's skills. It truly was the gluttonous demon of the 7 deadly sins. If he could steal Cerberus' skills, he would surely become even stronger. Indeed, after absorbing the essence of the 3-headed hellhound Cerberus, he actually gained the high-level skill Cerberus Incineration, but he couldn't let it continue absorbing. He still hoped to bring the corpse to Hugo to claim the reward. However, when sensing the sword within him, he discovered another skill, Rapid Brown Mouse Regeneration. Unexpectedly, this sword had even devoured the mouse under Cerberus' corpse. This sword truly was not picky about its food. At this point, he had prepared the demonic creatures for the practical exam. The young Baskerville hounds returned after completing the practical assessment, and the evaluation took place immediately after. In the blink of an eye, he was back at the exam site. Everyone was covered in injuries but had received their respective scores and rewards. But when he appeared with the corpse of the 3-headed Cerberus hound, all the judges were dumbstruck. There was no doubt, he became the top candidate in this survival exam. News of him hunting the high-level monster also reached Hugo's ears. He was truly astonished to the utmost. He immediately ordered the butler to summon him to inquire further about this matter. Intrigued by the cunning youngster who used poison to kill that Cerberus hound, he believed knowledge was power, and power was value. Hugo differed from the former patriarchs. He did not care about bloodlines when raising a hound. It did not matter whether the child was born from a royal womb or a prostitute's. What mattered to him was talent and determination. So the butler went to summon him. After meeting Hugo, he knew what he wanted to ask. He recounted in detail how he defeated and killed the severely injured 3-headed Cerberus hound. At this point, Hugo also tried to probe him, but he was no longer the foolish brat from his previous life. He immediately put on an act for him. He was the hound of the clan. The patriarch was his master. He would forever be loyal to the clan. He seemed very satisfied with his answer. As per tradition, Hugo rewarded him with the creature he had captured, and since he ranked first, he gave him the opportunity to make a wish. He immediately requested to enter the Imperial Pandora Library. This opportunity was something he had been waiting for who knows how long, as this library was a massive library located in the deepest part of the Baskerville main citadel, one of the largest libraries in the empire. Only the Patriarch, Vice-Patriarch, and their direct descendants were allowed to enter this library. In his previous life, since he was Hugo's illegitimate son, he was not permitted to enter, so throughout that entire life, he had never set foot in there. Unexpectedly, in this life, Hugo agreed to his wish, even allowing him access to the restricted area of the library. He also told him to go to the 6th forbidden area to read the 6th stance of Baskerville swordsmanship. This surprised him greatly. Was this the Hugo he knew? In his previous life, no illegitimate child had the right to read beyond the 4th stance, but he knew he should not get too excited. After all, this was only the 6th stance. Currently, Hugo had attained the 7th stance, and in the future, he could potentially reach the 9th stance. Learning the 6th stance was not too important, for his goal was far more significant than this, and Hugo also wished him a fruitful harvest. If he knew he intended to read the legendary sword scripture left behind by the Baskerville ancestors, he wondered if he would still be permitted. That book contained the pure, true essence of the Baskerville clan. In his previous life, it was only discovered much later, written by the first patriarch, who had vanquished the 7 deadly sins. But now, no one knew the value of that book. In this life, he was determined to surpass Hugo and become the strongest. Their battle had only just begun. However, to achieve this dream, he had to quickly enhance his own strength. The Imperial Pandora Library housed the sacred scripture he longed for, and just now, Hugo had agreed to allow him entry. Unexpectedly, in his previous life, despite his personal ambition and helping him kill relentlessly, he was still denied access to view the sacred scripture. But in this life, at just 8 years old, he had already achieved his previous life's dream. After gaining permission, he went to the library. The first thing he did was to view the sword scripture that Hugo had introduced. He recorded the combination of the clan's first 6 sword stances. He never expected him to allow an illegitimate child like himself to view the 6th stance. Perhaps to him, An 8-year-old child would never be able to memorize those sword stances anyway. If it were his previous life, he would have been moved to kneel and express gratitude. In the Baskerville clan, apart from direct descendants, others could only learn the first 4 sword stances in their entire lifetime. No matter how talented they were, without support and swordsmanship from the clan, they could never surpass the 4th fang in their lifetime. In his previous life, his talent was the best in the clan, but in the end, he could only painstakingly deduce the 5th fang without being able to execute that stance, because after mastering the 4th fang, he had severed his mana connection channels. That was also the direct reason why he could never match Hugo in his entire life. In the Baskerville clan's swordsmanship, each level of stances is classified by the number of fangs. So, level 1 is 1 fang, level 2 is 2 fangs, distinctively accompanied by a deep red aura running along the blade when the fangs manifest. But his purpose this time was not for that 6th fang. What he truly needed was not in the restricted area, but in the periodicals section of the library. Under the perplexed gaze of the servants, he headed towards the miscellaneous book section. The servants mocked him for being too young to seize the opportunity to read more books in the restricted area, but instead going to that miscellaneous book section. Finally, he found an old book on swordsmanship in a secluded corner, titled Tang and Nha. The book recorded some basic knowledge of swordsmanship, but due to missing many pages, it was considered trash. However, he knew the true value of this sacred scripture. In his previous life, before his regression, the hunting pack he joined had found a strange object on the Black Crimson Peak border region. It was a page on swordsmanship, a torn page from this very sacred scripture, written in the Baskerville clan's handwriting. Sensing something was amiss, Hugo had ordered a search for the book containing this page within the Imperial Pandora Library. The book found was a swordsmanship sacred scripture called Tang and Nha, but when the missing pages were assembled, it contained the legendary 10th fang of the Baskerville lineage. Obsessed with the thought of the 10th fang, Hugo unleashed the hunting hounds of the clan to track down the remaining 6 pages, but he knew those remaining pages were hidden within 7 other powerful clans. In his previous life, with his help, Hugo had collected those 7 pages and thus attained the 9th fang. At that time, he had far surpassed everyone on this continent, but he never allowed him to learn anything beyond the 4th fang. In the end, fearing he would reveal the secret, he beheaded him. Unfortunately, the heavens granted him reincarnation, so in this life, he would not let anyone else in the clan know of the 10th fang's existence. He assembled the swordsmanship book with the remaining fragments he had found in his previous life. He still vividly remembered the contents, having read it all night. The reason he knew the contents of the 7 missing pages in his previous life, could not advance beyond the 4th fang, was because he had never touched the original sacred scripture containing those writings. The first step of the 10th fang was similar to the essence within the 1st fang. At the moment he manifested his combat aura, drawing his sword and forming an arc along the sword path. All sword paths ended with the same limit. He muttered, "No wonder. Most people would treat this book as a lowly thing filled with nonsense." But when the missing pages were placed back in their positions, the seemingly arrogant, fabricated information became a stroke-by-stroke riddle painting of beautiful masterpiece. Before his regression, he was at the 4th fang level in swordsmanship and a high-ranking graduate swordsman in aura. He would regain his former strength before regression at age 15. Just then, he realized he could no longer sense the presence of the guards from earlier. He decided to practice what he had just learned. In the next moment, he easily used the 4th fang, which in his previous life took him until 30 to attain. But his heart burned with anger. In his previous life, he had lived a shallow existence. He could attain the high-ranking graduate swordsman title through diligent work, but was looked down upon by his own clan for being unable to learn proper swordsmanship. And the reason he could not learn the 5th fang or higher levels was simply because he was an illegitimate child, something he had no control over. He drew another sword path, and suddenly, the 5th fang flowed smoothly from him, though still with slight imperfections, but it was usable. In the clan, anyone who reached the 5th fang was considered a supreme expert. At this moment, a warm feeling welled up from within, a choking sensation, a desire to cry tears of joy. Vicar wanted to weep tears of happiness at attaining the fifth fang after all those years. He thought to himself that if he could now further enhance his mana, he would reach the strength milestone before his regression. His mana reserves were still steadily growing, this time through his awakening. It would grow in multiple dimensions. He sensed this flow. The liquefaction of aura was the mark of a swordsman. It seemed he had advanced from a skilled swordsman to a low-rank swordmaster, a level he had only reached at 30 in his previous life, but could attain at just 8 years old in this life. A swordmaster was an entirely different realm, with enhanced aura density and fewer limitations on state transitions. His swordsmanship now was better than before, possessing unlimited potential. The Fang strike he had learned in his previous life allowed him to be stronger, but had growth limitations, compared to which Tang in NHA was a perfect swordsmanship combining offense and defense, without any growth limits. Now that he had memorized the entire book's contents, so let it disappear from this world. Burning this piece of trash would go unnoticed. Those two guarding knights would surely keep this a secret from him. After accomplishing his greatest goal, he returned to the clan to meet Hugo, but he intentionally revealed that he had obtained something warm and sharp, yet as gentle as ocean waves. At this, Hugo and the butler were stunned, unsure if he had acquired an aura, which signified one had truly set foot in the world of swordsmanship. Even for a genius training relentlessly, it would take at least 15 years to enter the low-level skilled swordsman realm. Hugo was utterly astonished in his heart, but doubted his own thoughts. After all, Vicar was only 8 years old, yet he still wanted him to demonstrate a bit of what he had learned from the 6th restricted area and what he had just described. Immediately, he brought him to the clan's massive arena. While everyone was puzzled by the summons, he calmly awaited the opponent Hugo had arranged. Moments later, the iron cage in front opened. It turned out to be a C-rank orc. Hugo was still underestimating him too much. As the chains binding the orc were removed, its bloodthirsty nature instantly erupted. No longer restrained, it charged at him in a frenzy. But in the blink of an eye, he had severed its arm, leaving the orc's face filled with bewilderment and horror. Seeing that look, he understood. The orc's rapid regeneration ability was ineffective against his sword. It turned out with that previous strike, he had applied a B-rank skill of the Hellhound. Lower-ranked skills of level 1 monsters cannot overcome higher-ranked skills. But this outcome surely still didn't satisfy Hugo. He clearly knew Hugo was thinking he hadn't shown everything he had comprehended in the library, so he would show Hugo what he desired. He then summoned an aura sword, leaving everyone stunned, after which he immediately killed the orc, shocking Hugo. The butler congratulated him on the clan having a genius emerge, but Hugo restrained his delight, claiming he had only won because this orc had grown too weak. Under his tremendous power, the orc was sliced into countless flying chunks of flesh, but clearly, he was still unsatisfied. He then asked Hugo, "Clan leader, is there anything stronger than this orc?" He thought to himself that he should reveal just enough strength. If lucky, his achievement would be recognized, and he would have a chance to separate from Hugo. Hugo had also been infected by his bloodlust, his whole body excited. He then ordered a mutated giant monster to be his opponent. Seeing the giant monster before him, only now did he start getting serious. It must be said that, to push his limits, Hugo truly found him a formidable opponent. This monster was incredibly powerful and had excellent recovery abilities. To defeat it, he was forced to use his sword skills. However, he absolutely could not reveal the fifth fang he had previously learned. Perhaps Hugo would think he achieved this by absorbing energy from high-level monsters and the sixth fang, because normally the fifth fang requires years of honing and ceaseless practice to comprehend. This is not something even a genius could accomplish so easily. Until now, Hugo had only grasped the fourth stance, but his ability had reached the pinnacle of the era. If he knew an 8-year-old had comprehended the fifth fang, he would surely turn him into an experiment subject immediately. Therefore, he needed to pretend to struggle mightily against the giant monster, because if he went all out, one strike could instantly annihilate that giant beast. Thinking this, he immediately charged to attack the giant monster. If Hugo wanted to see, he would put on a good show for him. This giant monster had monstrous regenerative abilities. His Beelzebub's hunger skill could not effectively stop it, so finding its weakness and striking vitally was the key. Under the giant monster's relentless attacks, he agilely evaded them all. Meanwhile, the young members in the stands thought he wanted to exhaust the giant monster. How foolish. The giant race has monstrous recovery abilities, let alone this being a mutated giant from a human. How could they exhaust its stamina? Although he pretended to struggle fiercely in combat, his strength was truly being drained. First, he had to block the giant's attacks. Next, he sought an opportunity to tear through its defenses. But in just a few seconds, the wound had healed as before. Everyone in the stands thought he was about to fail. Even Hugo wanted him to retreat, or else the enraged giant would become dangerous. But he said he had one final move, failing which he would withdraw. The first fang just now couldn't defeat it, so he would use the second fang. All his stalling was just to pretend he was comprehending techniques mid-battle. He also silently thanked the giant monster for playing along for so long. Now let him take its head as a thank you gift. The next moment, the second fang was formed. He shot like a meteor towards the giant's head. The terrifying sword immediately severed its head. In less than a minute, everyone in the stands was stunned. The bloody, savage killing made them unable to believe it was an 8-year-old. They couldn't believe he had used the second fang. He also timely expressed an astonished look, not understanding how he had done this. Hugo in the stands was completely stunned, speechless. But after this incident, the youths in the clan grew even more distant from him, or rather, feared him. They looked at him like a monster, immediately avoiding him. But when recalling that day, he still felt satisfied seeing Hugo's bewildered expression. In reality, the power he revealed was the second fang of Baskerville, the strength of an intermediate swordmaster. His true power was the fifth fang of Baskerville, but still quite weak, equivalent to a low-rank swordsman. Meanwhile, after that battle, he also absorbed the giant monster's super recovery ability. The other children avoided him without delay, except for 3 exceptional blonde-haired ones. After being taught a lesson by him, thanks to a mage's healing, they had quickly recovered. But now, they seemed to become his little fans. That disgusted him, as they acted like he was so cool for defeating the orc and giant humanoid monster. Hearing their flattery made his skin crawl. Fortunately, the butler timely appeared then, or else he wouldn't have been able to resist giving them a beating. The butler informed him to go to the clan leader's office immediately. At this time, the arrogant flag of the Morg clan was flying before the Baskerville clan gates. This was one of the 7 great clans of the empire. If Baskerville specialized in assassin swordsmanship, then Morg was entirely a clan of mages. In the office, Hugo was facing an imposing man, the representative clan leader of Morg, Adolf Morg. They were discussing the upcoming joint training between the two clans. However, in recent years, due to disputes over the exploitation of the border ruby mine, the two sides frequently clashed. In fact, initially, these two clans did not have such conflicts with each other. But the king had said that magic and swordsmanship were meant to complement each other. These were the words of the emperor from 2 generations ago. Following the emperor's words, the Baskerville and Morg clans began joint training. Only children aged 8 to 15 could participate, and the annual event between the two clans began on a very good note. But at one point, disputes arose. Between the territories of the Baskerville and Morg clans emerged an issue of sovereignty over a ruby ore mine, after which the relationship between the two clan leaders deteriorated. But due to the emperor's decree, the joint training still had to continue. Therefore, the one coming this time was not the Morg clan leader, but his younger brother, Adolf, meeting the Baskervilles as the representative deputy leader. And upon hearing that Baskerville had a genius, Adolf introduced to Hugo that Morg also had a talented mage. It was a red-haired girl, who also pushed open the door and entered the clan leader's room. But as soon as she entered, she accused Hugo of seizing Morg's ruby mine. She bluntly called Hugo a thief. But Hugo paid no heed to those childish words. However, the little girl continued provoking him. At this point, Hugo was angered. How could the clan leader of the Baskerville Bloodsword clan be insulted like this? But the young Camus still said that it was Adolf who had spoken those words when getting off the carriage. She was merely repeating them, but Adolf was feigning ignorance, while Camus insisted that Adolphe had said these words. Then the girl stubbornly demanded Hugo return the rubies to their clan, and she couldn't proceed with her research due to the lack of rubies. Hugo was furious. He said the Morgue clan didn't know how to teach their descendants proper conduct, and Adolphe put on an act, asking him what he was saying to a child like Camus. Then he asked, wasn't Hugo, a holy sword of the Empire, trying to oppress an 8-year-old child? At this moment, he also arrived at the clan leader's room and arrogantly said, I guess the Morgue clan didn't teach their descendants not to covet what belongs to others. But hearing that, the girl angrily stood before him in defiance. But as soon as he saw her, he was stunned. This was Camus Morgue? In her previous life, she was the only queen of the Morgue clan. At her peak, she had conquered all the monsters and barbarians of La Rouge Mountain. The way she burned and incinerated them into blood and dust was widely spread. Moreover, she could even control the royal family to the extent of being called the representative of authority. If in her previous life, after Hugo achieved the 9th technique, there was anyone who could be compared to him, it would be this girl who would become the future queen of magic. Furthermore, if she continued to develop like her previous life, this young Camus would be fully capable of directly ruling the entire continent. Because at that time, Hugo was at the end of his lifespan, while Camus was still young and vigorous. Moreover, she was truly beautiful and charming as the rumors said. However, that was only a distant future. For now, she was still a child. Seeing him ignoring her, Camus grew even angrier. She argued with him again about the rights to exploit the ruby mine. Unfortunately, the Morgue clan had always misunderstood one thing. Rubies were magical materials, very important to them, but for the construction-specialized Baskerville clan, the ownership of the land was more important. However, Morgue took advantage of the mine being on the border between the two clans to recklessly exploit Baskerville's territory. As a clan of swordsmen, how could they accept that? At this moment, Camus used her hand to create an ice model, pointing to the border area between the two clans, saying, this is called the Common Security Zone. You must know that the ore here produces high-quality rubies, right? The problem is that the entrance to this ore mine is on the land territory of the Morgue clan, while the underground part of the mine is within Baskerville's territory. As you can see, the structure of the ore mine makes it impossible for the Baskerville clan to mine the rubies themselves. So don't you think the ruby ore should belong to our Morgue clan? However, your family insists that we have encroached on your territory and interfered with our mining operations, and even refused our proposal to lease the relevant territory. Adolphe nodded, praising his eloquent granddaughter, while he looked at Camus and said, the mineral called ruby is indeed often used as a magical material. The Baskervilles don't really need to use those mined rubies. But about leasing that territory, it seems the greatest tragedy of your Morgue clan is that no one in the Baskerville clan is foolish enough to lease their land for a pittance. Camus angrily clarified that he said the Baskerville clan had no interest in rubies. He nodded and said that's right, his family only cared about the territory, so they wouldn't let her family trespass. And anyway, it was the Morgue clan who was inconvenienced by the lack of rubies, not his clan. Then Camus angrily raised her hand, clearly delineating the territories of the two sides, and said the ruby mine belonged to her family. But immediately he pulled Camus' tiny hand towards the image of the Baskerville clan's territory. In the angry gaze of the girl, he said, hey, you're asking when your hand crosses over our territory. Then whose hand does it belong to? Obviously, it belongs to me. Hearing that, Camus became even more embarrassed and shouted, what are you saying? It seemed she misunderstood his meaning. He immediately drew the short dagger from his waist. To everyone's surprise, he pointed the dagger at Camus' arm and said, I said your arm belongs to me. But just as he was about to sever the girl's arm, a terrifying aura came from behind, piercing through the bones and marrow. Unexpectedly, Adolphe Morgue had been standing behind him for some time. In an instant, a cold aura rendered him immobile. Camus seized the opportunity to escape from his grasp. A moment later, she hugged Adolphe tightly and cried uncontrollably. Seeing his granddaughter being bullied like that, Adolphe could not contain his fury. Turning around, he loudly asked Hugo, is this how you treat guests? At this point, Hugo also realized he had gone a bit too far. But before Hugo could speak up, he had already taken the initiative to apologize to Camus and Adolphe. He explained that the short dagger earlier was just a toy, and that the children in the Baskerville clan had been playing with such toys since they were young. At this point, Hugo intervened in time, preventing Adolf from getting enraged. After the incident, Hugo told Adolf that he had a better proposal regarding the ruby mine issue. Both sides would discuss it after the joint training session. As for the matter between the two children, they should be allowed to resolve it themselves. Now Camus turned back, her eyes red and swollen from crying, but she still warned him to be careful. He didn't say anything, just smiled and apologized. Before long, the day of the joint training arrived. This friendly match included boys and girls aged 8 to 15 from both sides. The biggest highlight was the match between the two prodigies, Camus and him. The bell rang, and the match between him and Camus was about to begin. Indeed, Camus was a magical prodigy. At an age nearly equivalent to his, she could already use 4 layers of magic simultaneously. Perhaps in the younger generation of Baskervilles, no one except him could defeat her. And when she saw him easily evading her terrifying spells, just as he was about to engage in close combat, a magical earth wall suddenly appeared, blocking his path. It turned out Camus had summoned another formidable spell. Truly a magical prodigy. She could even use spells without incantations. Such a genius, it's a pity she encountered him, the tenacious one. His strength easily shattered the wall in an instant. Now too close, Camus couldn't defend in time. Just as she was about to close her eyes and accept the attack, he simply flicked his fingers, sending her flying away. But this only made her angrier, a lump forming on her forehead, making her feel resentful. Then Camus summoned a double-layered sand wall, smugly saying to see how he could get through to her. But he silently thought it was useless, as he could clearly just go around the wall to reach her. Yet he cheerfully used his bare hands to break through the sand layers, his hand penetrating the 2 walls right in front of Camus, then flicking her again. He thought teaching her with force would make her know better than to retreat. Little did he expect this would bring greater trouble. He only saw Camus furiously unleashing spells in succession, but he couldn't harm her while she had no intention of giving up. It was quite a predicament. But then he noticed another match behind, and came up with a good idea. As the morgue mage released a spell, he immediately jumped back, pushing aside the Baskerville youth and shouting a warning for Camus to prepare her defense. But it was too close and sudden. He only saw a brilliant fireball bloom in Camus' beautiful eyes. On the stands, Adolf was horrified. A moment later, a deafening explosion rang out from the arena. After the blast, black smoke enveloped everything. In the smoke, Camus heard her uncle Adolph's frantic voice calling her name. Although she blocked the fireball spell, her clothes had been completely burned off. Once the smoke cleared, everyone would see everything, and she would become a laughingstock of the 2 clans. Thinking this, tears fell from her eyes again. But how could he let that happen? This was his fault. He had overestimated the power of her magic. He took off the coat he was wearing and draped it over Camus' head, calmly saying, "Put this on." But Camus asked back, "Why would you protect your opponent?" He then said, "Then shall I take the coat back?" Camus hurriedly said, "That's not what I meant, but if you do that, you'll have nothing on." But Vicar paid no mind to this, remaining comfortably shirtless. But for a human hunter like him, what did that matter? As for Camus, she was touched, not expecting him to still care about her. During the recent explosion, seeing Camus unable to defend, he had stepped in to block the spell. His hand was also injured then. Unexpectedly, even a body blessed like this could hardly withstand that attack. Perhaps that Baskerville boy had added some aura to it. Now the dust had completely cleared. Seeing Camus was fine, Adolf also breathed a sigh of relief. But at this point, the winner between him and Camus was hard to determine. Although she was the one knocked down, his hand was also injured. However, what drew everyone's attention was his bare upper body, with perfect lines and supple muscles. It was hard to believe this was the body of an 8-year-old child. He must have trained diligently. At this point, Adolf stepped onto the arena and embraced Camus. It was great to have a loving uncle like that. After the training ended, Hugo asked him what he had learned from the confrontation with Camus. He honestly replied that this battle was very interesting. He had understood the meaning of this event once again. A battle with a mage was very different from one with a knight. The lessons learned were not small. Hugo asked why he didn't finish her off. He He said he was a bit flustered facing a lady. Hugo reminded him that lowering his guard in a battle would get him hurt, then told him to use the wound on his hand as a lesson for the future. Vicar was very surprised to see Hugo worry about him. In his previous life he only felt that Hugo was always cold, irritable and very violent. People often said his terrible personality was because he had lost his wife and daughter. Next, Hugo asked for his opinion on the ruby mine. He thought they should directly hand over the mine to the Morg clan, because for the Baskervilles, rubies had no use. The main goal of the clan was to expand their territory. The location of their ruby mine was downstream of the Black Blood Mountain. The monsters and barbarians there were a major obstacle for them. If they maneuvered the Morg clan ineptly, they could minimize losses in the process of developing that area. Hugo nodded in agreement. Once the Morg clan controlled the ruby mine, they would leave people in that area. They only needed to drive the monsters and barbarians into that area. That way they would kill two birds with one stone. The rubies would be bathed in the blood of their enemies. If that happened, the Morg clan would have to think twice before daring to enter Baskerville territory. His idea matched Hugo's by 90%. But this was not surprising, because in his previous life, he was the one responsible for pushing the monsters and barbarians to attack the Morg clan. Now they just had to see the Morg's opinion. Sure enough, Adolf took the initiative to continue negotiating with Hugo about a solution for the ruby mine. This time, Adolf wanted a marriage alliance between Baskerville and Morg, while paying enough to have Hugo grant them full mining rights over the ruby mine. But the one he wanted to marry was Camus and Hugo's eldest son. This made even Hugo feel it was unreasonable, because his eldest son was already 25 years old, 17 years older than Camus. Camus completely refused, saying that if she were to marry, her husband must be older than her, but first he would have to defeat her mother. Hearing this, Adolf kept trying to persuade her, because Camus' mother and father were among the strongest mages on the continent. With that condition, even Hugo would find it difficult to marry her. It seems Camus might remain single for life. But then Camus said that was her own condition. Moreover, she also disliked too large an age gap. She wanted to marry someone around her age or slightly younger. But Hugo said the sons of Baskerville were not for her to choose from. Camus also expressed that she was not joking and her gaze was fixed straight at him. At this point, Adolf became flustered. He whispered to Camus that he was just Hugo's illegitimate son. No matter how strong he became in the future, he would only be dust in the clan. This remark from Adolf made Hugo feel very annoyed. Hearing that, he paid no mind. The great clans were always like that. Even though he was the #1 genius of the clan, he was still looked down upon. It was like that in his previous life, and the same in this life. But Hugo cut Adolf off, saying that the wishes of both parties were most important. Immediately, Hugo asked him if he agreed to marry Camus. In the girl's hopeful gaze, he replied that he agreed. A future female lead character, now wanting to marry him, he had no reason to refuse. Even knowing Morg would not agree, he still had to try. Hearing him agree, Camus' youthful face blushed, full of the shyness of a young lady. In contrast, Adolf's expression had soured to the extreme. He did not expect him to so quickly agree to this. In his eyes, a bastard like him was unworthy of the precious Camus, the only legitimate daughter of the Morg clan. Hearing that, Camus blushed. She secretly thought that also meant he didn't hate her, which made her feel happy. Although Hugo said that in Baskerville, whether one was from the main or side branch didn't matter. Sometimes the main branch would produce inferior offspring, while the side branch gave birth to superior ones. Only ability mattered, but to Adolf it was just a joke. He didn't expect Hugo to value Vickers so highly. He thought to himself, Adolf is a very powerful person, one of the leaders of the Morg clan, a prestigious and excellent clan in magic. He was also known for doting on his granddaughter foolishly, and judging from Adolf's attitude towards him, it was clear he still looked down on him, even saying his agreement was too rash. He would not allow Camus to marry someone at will. Talent alone was not enough. Status and position were also needed. In truth, Adolf believed marriage alliances should be arranged within the clan, not by his own will, and he felt no child in the Baskerville clan was suitable for Camus. After being insulted repeatedly like that, his patience had reached its limit. He did not respond. Adolf impatiently placed his hand on his shoulder and asked if he could hear. Why wasn't he answering his question? But he said he didn't hear him speak, because he wasn't actually talking to him. Camus was utterly surprised to see him being so bold in front of Adolphe, while Hugo was clearly very pleased with his expression. Unexpectedly, Adolphe suddenly burst out laughing and wanted to speak privately with Vicar. Hugo only asked if the great mage of the empire wanted to interrogate an 8-year-old child, but Adolphe said that he was the child who would one day become the husband of his granddaughter. He was not requesting this as a representative of the Morgue clan, but as the uncle of his granddaughter. Despite Camus trying to stop him, Adolphe silenced her and said this was very necessary. Finally, Hugo still agreed to Adolphe's request. Adolphe Morgue, one of the strongest mages of Morgue. Even with his peak abilities from his previous life, he could not directly defeat him, but if he intentionally wanted to fight, he was not afraid. He and Adolphe went to the arena. At this point, Adolphe even said he shouldn't hold back, let him see the source of his confidence in accepting his marriage proposal. He outwardly agreed, but if he truly used all his power, he was sure Adolphe would be terrified. In Adolphe's palm, magical energy flared up. The next moment, the three elements of water, fire, earth appeared surrounding him, creating objects from nothingness. Truly terrifying and spine-chilling. He was creating a vase. On the stands, Camus was also astonished, for she rarely saw Adolphe take action. Unexpectedly, he easily and perfectly combined the three elements. At this point, Adolphe pointed to the water vase he just created on his head and told him that he would handicap himself. He would fight him one-on-one while wearing the water vase on his head. As long as he could make him spill a single drop, he would win. Seeing him look down on him so much, he could not bear it any longer. He immediately charged forward to attack him with his sword. Previously, he had secretly calculated his chances of winning if he faced him with his full power from his previous life. It seemed he only had a 50% chance of winning through assassination, and a direct confrontation would likely only give him a 10% chance at most. Now he didn't need to fight with all his strength. His goal was only to demonstrate just enough to satisfy Hugo. But Camus shouted a warning that he should not charge straight at Adolphe. Hearing that, he was startled, because in his previous life, he had never directly confronted a mage of Adolphe's level, but he managed to stop his attack in time. Hearing his granddaughter's intervention, Adolphe was also helpless. It turned out there was a barrier in front of him. Without a special aura, it was impossible to break through. But the movements of his hands did not stop. He only saw countless sharp stone spikes appearing around him and shooting towards him. But at this moment, Camus in the stands shouted that Adolphe was going too far. He would never use such spells when sparring with her. Adolphe asked Camus back whose side she was on. Seeing Adolphe showing some restraint, Hugo didn't need to intervene in the match. He was curious to see what the young hound would reveal before this great mage. After he dodged the dangerous spikes, he knew winning this match by force was impossible. He could exploit Adolphe's thinking that he dared not attack directly. Immediately he charged straight in to shatter the water vase. Then he continuously aimed arrows at Adolphe's magic barrier. If one failed, he would just continue. He attacked the same spot repeatedly like a machine. Adolphe found his repetitive attacks strange, but he also acknowledged that he attacked the same place with absolute precision like a machine. He thought his focus and swordsmanship deserved recognition. However, because his defensive barrier was far sturdier than the sword, sure enough, after countless slashes, his sword shattered against the barrier. Adolphe said what he did was no different than trying to break a stone wall by throwing an egg at it. He also praised him for stubbornly and strenuously trying to break the barrier, then advised him to carefully consider his opponent before using tactics. But his goal was achieved. On the stands, Camus couldn't believe her eyes looking down at the arena. Adolphe was still scolding him for his foolish actions, saying he was far from being able to get engaged to his granddaughter. But the water from the vase on his head had already streamed down his forehead. It turned out the broken shard of his sword had pierced the water vase. He even mocked Adolphe for being flustered and not knowing what to do, asking if that was enough, or if he needed to make more water spill out of the vase. Seeing his imposing manner in the arena, the maiden Camus' heart also pounded like a deer. perhaps in Camus' eyes. He only luckily broke Adolphe's water vase, but that also meant their engagement was decided. In Hugo's eyes, he had demonstrated perfectly, not luckily. He also thought he had raised a more cunning hound than he had imagined. Unfortunately, despite that, Adolphe still felt this matter would be reconsidered when he and Camus came of age. But in the end, Hugo still transferred the ruby mine exploitation rights to the Morgue family. 7 years had passed. In the family tournament, the old Baskerville hound pups had become brave, battle-hardened knights. With their current achievements, all had reached the level of master knights and learned the Baskerville first fang swordsmanship. Moreover, the triple-stab sword technique of the three blonde brothers had been mastered. And today, this will be the final training session for everyone in the family. The Baskerville family's sword training instructor said that all of them must use their talents and passion to overcome the upcoming difficulties, or accumulate experience and strive to survive with whatever they have. Now they have graduated. After that, everyone will be assigned to different battlefields to carry out missions. It could be defeating the barbarians at the borders, or fighting monsters in the forbidden areas, the monsters in the Black Mountains, or the outstanding managers protecting the spiritual realms. Under the solemn blessings of the hound trainer, this batch of hounds has completely withdrawn. But before they leave, they need to choose their knight order. The Baskerville family has 7 different knight orders. The 7 orders correspond to 7 different swords and require different mission completions such as investigation, protection, assassination, suppression, direct confrontation. Some have paid attention to him, wondering if he could become a managerial figure like the main branch's son or just a sword to expand territory. And he, Vicar Baskerville, is currently a 15-year-old teenager. At present, the true strength he has demonstrated in the family is the third fang, equivalent to the hounds in the order. But currently, he is actually at the intermediate sword master level, the fifth fang, but his latent strength has not made significant progress. It took him up to 7 years to advance from a lower sword master to an intermediate one. If only talking about swordsmanship, he has truly surpassed his own level before being reborn. But this progress is still too slow compared to his expectations. However, he has not yet mastered the sixth fang. At this moment, the butler suddenly appeared, interrupting his train of thought. It turned out Hugo had just returned from the battlefield and wanted to see him. It seems his position in the family has been decided. Coming to the master's room, he saw Hugo after many years apart. Since handing over the ruby mine to the Morgues, the family has been busy with the war against the barbarians and monsters. After 7 years of warfare, Hugo has aged and become much more seasoned. He noticed the scar on Hugo's nose. He said it was caused by a woman using a bow when he was facing some savage tribes on Mount La Rouge. Although he couldn't capture the opponent, he also left a similar scar on them. The reason Hugo called him was because he wanted to know which knight order he would choose to join. In his previous life, after graduating he became a member of the Pit Bull Knight Order, then was sent to Mount La Rouge for 21 months, facing countless life and death situations, then was thrown into actual battlefields. Currently, the children of the Baskerville family are divided into the elite or mercenary groups after turning 15 years old. While the mercenaries die on the battlefields, the elites are groomed for political and ruling roles. After accumulating countless experiences on the battlefields, the mercenaries will start serving the elites, like loyal ferocious hounds serving their masters, helping the elites develop in politics and governance. And of course, what helps prolong the gap between the elite and mercenary is the fifth fang. That's why in his previous life, he was only taught up to the fourth fang. Will Hugo allow him to join the elite group this life? He was very curious about that. But for a sword genius like him, would Hugo miss the opportunity to have him be a hound carrying out external missions? However, Hugo wanted him to strive to become a counselor. He explained that a counselor would administer and legislate within the Baskerville territory to maintain fairness, attract businesses to establish in this territory. Simply put, he would be in charge of all big and small matters in the family. At this moment, he was also dumbfounded. He really allowed a bastard child, yet a genius like him, to become an elite? And Hugo frankly said that what he had achieved had made him lead the geniuses for at least a decade, so he would give him appropriate treatment. He even allowed him to be the vice consul of a city called Underdog, which is the city of the underdogs. Currently, both the consul and vice-consul positions are vacant. He could try the role of vice-consul first. Hugo asked if he was willing. Vicar said he would follow Hugo's wishes, but there was one thing he wanted to ask for his help. He mentioned the dispute over the ruby mine with the Morgue clan. Hugo didn't understand if he had any issue with the Morgues or wanted to ask about the reward, but it was clear he had never said he would give him any reward. But he said he wanted to borrow that reward. He knew it was an excessive request, but Hugo was very decisive in signing the money check he needed, because he trusted his son would not do anything foolish. He was extremely grateful and said he would not let Hugo worry. But no matter how many years passed, he still couldn't get used to Hugo calling him his son, because in his previous life at this age, he had barely met Hugo a few times, never heard that unfamiliar name. He couldn't forget the pain of being beheaded, as if ingrained in his bones. Until now, he still felt his neck as if a blade was always hanging over it. He would never forget the pain Hugo had caused him in his previous life. Just now Hugo wanted him to join the elite group to learn how to manage the family, while holding the position of vice mayor of their weakest city in their territory. And he had accepted the Lord's proposal, preparing to depart for the family's territory. The butler also said that Hugo deeply cared for him, which is why he didn't immediately send him to actual battlefields and even gave him the consul position. That is the path of a future ruler, so Hugo valued him greatly. He laughed, saying that would only happen if he performed well as the vice-consul. If he could utilize the authority of the vice-consul properly, he could safely enhance his skills to a new level. He didn't care about the current job. It couldn't make his memories fade. He vividly remembered the feeling of his head leaving his neck on the execution stand. He was determined to make Hugo experience that feeling. A few days later, he arrived at Underdog City, said to be the most chaotic of the family. Everyone in the consulate was cleaning. They discussed hoping the new vice-consul would be experienced in trade and business. Someone said the new vice-consul being only 15 years old surprised everyone. They didn't know what to expect from someone only 15 years old. As Vicar entered the consulate, he was stopped by a servant, who thought he was the child of some servant, but his ferocious gaze and authoritative words immediately made the servant fearfully back away. Next, he took out the family's appointment letter and ordered to prepare delicacies, premium wine, as he would host a grand feast tonight. Hearing this, the servants were stunned because he had arrived a day earlier than expected, but they still prepared everything according to his demands, and invited the wealthy merchants and nobles of the city to the feast. However, the office manager named Chihuahua in Underdog looked at the lavish feast before him with worry for the city's future. For a newly appointed superior to indulge in feasting and drinking would surely displease everyone. He had a difficult time with the previous consul, who was dismissed for accepting bribes. But organizing a feast at this sacred workplace was truly excessive. He was furious that the family had sent a brat to govern a city and shouted that he would ruin the entire city. But at that moment, Vicar suddenly appeared behind Chihuahua and asked, "Are you the manager of this city?" His cold tone ringing from behind gave Chihuahua quite a fright, but he still briefly introduced himself. Vicar had already investigated him beforehand. Unlike other Baskerville family members, the main branch would have the surname prefix "le", while the side branches would have Van, like his name Vicar Van Baskerville or the family head Hugo Le Baskerville. But Chihuahua didn't have a surname prefix, meaning he came from outside the clan. In other words, they had no blood relation. He was simply an employee of the family. He was a rescued resident in Underdog City, and due to his excellent work, he was appointed by the family and took the Baskerville surname. Vicar knew he had worked very hard over the years, because the previous consul was dismissed for corruption. He told Chihuahua that he would not interfere with their work, and trusted he would surely accomplish it well. Chihuahua could only agree with him, as he couldn't guess what Vicar was planning. He proposed hosting the feast but didn't participate, instead staying to chat with Chihuahua and read books. He gave Chihuahua legal documents and said Underdog City had too many loopholes in its regulations. The problem with the underdogs was that too many black market businesses were operating. That economy was standing above the law, They used illegal means to drain this city. This made the citizens increasingly impoverished. The previous consul's negligence also made people lose faith in the family's governance of the city. So first they needed to rebuild trust with the citizens. He would eliminate the core leaders of those underground markets. After that, he would eliminate all the illegal organizations. Therefore, he needed a legitimate reason to uproot the underground forces. And as the vice consul with the authority to enact new laws, he would seize the opportunity to enact a new law. This new law would completely drain the black market within a week. Moreover, he needed a justifiable reason to enforce the new law to demonstrate his capability and gain the trust of the citizens here. Therefore, he would lay out some bait to attract the flies. Chihuahua was utterly astonished, believing he was planning something. On the second day, Dort Smile Street was packed with people. Everyone gathered to see him announce the new law, but they were full of doubt and contempt for a 15-year-old vice consul, thinking a brat couldn't possibly do anything. Facing their suicidal attitude, he didn't say much. Seeing enough people had gathered, he immediately took a wooden stick, stood on the podium and said, "I'm sure you've all read the notices here. Although the vice consul has changed, the Baskerville family's autonomous laws are still in effect. They will remain unchanged." Hearing the mocking comments, Chihuahua angrily shouted, "Fools, have you forgotten who is responsible for your safety? He comes from the main castle of the Baskerville family. Do I need to put a sword to your necks for you to calm down?" The people seemed to greatly respect Chihuahua. Hearing him, they immediately stopped, with some saying it would be better for Chihuahua to be the vice consul. How could a brat like him enforce the law? Hearing these words, he forcefully thrust the stick in his hand into the ground. The stick firmly planted into the ground. He then coldly said, "With my authority as the vice consul, I will announce and enact a new special law. Vicier's Special Law, Article 1, Clause 1. Whoever can pull out this stake will receive 100 million gold." This declaration not only left the citizens utterly stunned, but even Chihuahua and the subordinates behind were dumbfounded. In an instant, the entire street erupted in heated discussion. This amount equaled 4 years of work for a person. But no one believed his words. They even thought whoever tried would be instantly killed by him. Seeing no one dared to try, he increased the reward to 1 billion. But still, no one moved. Some even said he was mocking them, and would never produce such a large sum of money. Faced with this, he only coldly laughed. Next, he increased the reward to 10 billion gold. At this point, people began to hesitate, but they still didn't believe his words. Looking at the sword on his hip, everyone feared he had other intentions. It was best not to try. But at that moment, a small hand raised up. It was a pretty little flower girl, wanting to give it a try. But those around advised the girl not to try, as he would kill her after she pulled out the stake. However, the girl's mother was seriously ill and needed money for treatment. So the girl didn't hesitate much, and decided to take the risk. She asked that if anything happened to her, please help take care of her mother. The girl approached him. He didn't say anything, just pointed at the stake and told her to pull it out. And the girl easily pulled out the stake. Everyone was stunned at how easy it was. The girl also began to worry, as it seemed too simple. At this moment, his hand moved towards his hip. The girl thought he was drawing his sword to kill her. But instead, he handed her a heavy bag of gold, containing 100 million gold. He then looked at Chihuahua behind him and asked the girl where she lived, as 10 billion gold was very heavy, so he would have someone deliver it to her home. He patted the girl's head and told everyone, "This is the law, and the law must be obeyed. As long as you follow his rules, everyone will receive their due reward." He would frequently enact similar laws. In this way, the new consul's reputation as a generous and true to his word man spread throughout the city. In fact, this was an opportunity for the Vicier's special law to become more prevalent than the Baskerville family's autonomous law. If someone broke the law, they would be punished, but if they obeyed, they would be rewarded. This simple method quickly ingrained itself deep in the hearts of the citizens of Underdog City. Since enacting Vicier's special law, criminal activities have decreased significantly, with the crime rate dropping by half. In his previous life, Camus used this method to fight against her family, and also gained many loyal followers. This was knowledge he learned in his previous life from an ancient, mysterious eastern country he had visited by chance. He never expected to use that method again in this life at this time. After finishing the task, he told Chihuahua to deliver the gold to the girl and assign someone to protect her. He and Chihuahua returned to the consulate. The initial step of building trust was complete. He said they couldn't get angry at people who didn't trust and look down on the law. He just thought of ways to attract attention and leave a strong impression. Chihuahua was deeply moved by his way of working, saying he would follow him for the rest of his life. Now realizing the difficulties he had faced after meeting the vice consul were not in vain. Now he had a new problem. They had given away 10 billion gold, so they had to think of a way to earn that money back. He used a pen to mark the places where illegal organizations often hid. With his memories from his previous life, he knew exactly where they were hiding, so he would clear out those places and confiscate their black money. But at that moment, someone came running to report that there was a request for an inquiry from the Youth Autonomous Council of the city. Hearing this, he smiled wryly. It seems those scumbags have just woken up from last night's party. He mocked. So the nobles who only know how to talk big in that council want to see me. The Youth Autonomous Council consisted of members from various families. They were the second and third generation of the local families within Baskerville's territory. Although called the Youth Autonomous Council, it was actually a social organization. It seemed the young masters had something to say about his vicir's special law. He laughed again. So the flies have smelled the dung? They couldn't resist anymore. Let him then exterminate these worms gnawing at the city's authority. But when he arrived at the so-called meeting room, he was even more enraged by these worms. Waiting for him was not a meeting, but a party of the rich young masters in the city. The place they held the party was the luxurious hotel club of Underdog City, sparing no extravagance, with a room in the deepest part of the club, the VIP room costing 10 million gold for 6 hours. The participants were the 7 core members of the city's Youth Autonomous Council. They were also the young masters of the 7 local families in Underdog City under Baskerville's territory. They were indulging in extravagance here, filling a tower of towering glasses with bottles of wine worth 10 million gold each. They even told the servants to lick up the wine spilled on the table as a reward. But the servants also flatteringly thanked the young masters for letting them taste this expensive wine. They were smug that no matter how much they spent, their money would never run out. All thanks to the Baskerville family that they could live such a luxurious life. The slave trade was still thriving, and the enslavement of barbarians was going smoothly, all because Baskerville only cared about expanding their borders and had no eyes or ears from the royal family around here. So this was a perfect playground. Even the clubs here were more extravagant than those in the capital. Not to mention the Baskerville family was protecting them, making it extremely safe. Truthfully, this was no different from the Baskerville family being their hunting dogs. In their eyes, the Baskerville family was just a bunch of ignorant warmongers, unaware that they were being trapped by the local families. Which was why the Baskerville family personally massacred the Messimidrano family, the most loyal of the 8 families. The reason for eliminating this family was because they had obstructed their fun. They then discussed Vicar, the new vice consul, considering him an illegal obstacle, but none of them had heard of this person before. He was only 15 years old, and even organized a big party right after arriving, definitely a foolish idiot, fond of indulgence just like them. The leader even said they should tease him a bit to assert their position. They planned to hold a big party with the most expensive wines and plenty of women, and when the party was over, they would leave the bill for him to pay. The others all agreed to this. The blonde one said that a 15-year-old brat like him definitely wouldn't have money to pay and would be very embarrassed, and wouldn't dare ask his family for money. Afterwards, they would just say it was a prank and pay themselves. Then he would obediently listen to them in the future. But he was the one who came to teach them a lesson. Thinking that, he strode into the room along with the girls the young masters had called. One of the young masters, seeing him, was puzzled, thinking someone had called a male waiter. At this moment, a waiter seeing him enter so brazenly thought he was a friend of the young masters. But realizing he wasn't, the waiter grabbed his hair and cursed, asking if he knew where this place was to just barge in. There were many who sought death, but few as brazen as him. In an instant, he twisted and broke the arm of the waiter grabbing his hair. Next, a scream of pain rang throughout the hall. Striding into the center of the hall, he coldly said, "Vicar van Baskerville, you summoned me here, didn't you?" But they didn't expect him to arrive so quickly. They kept apologizing to him. then discussed how to deal with him, wanting to get him to sit down, eat and drink, then make him pay the bill. But he didn't come to play family games with them. He slammed his hand on the table and said, "Stop this nonsensical talk here." Immediately he released his spiritual energy, letting it explode everywhere. In an instant, the piles of red wine glasses inside the hall shattered. The rich young masters were completely overwhelmed by this sight. Now they realized he was not a 15-year-old brat, but a true swordsman. Seeing the sharp energy emanating from him, they began to panic, doubting if he was really only 15 years old. The blonde one told the guy next to him, an intermediate skilled swordsman, to quickly fight him, but the other fearfully said if he fought him, he couldn't last even a second. At this moment, he approached and placed his hand on a young master's shoulder. But before he could speak, he had already revealed his plan to deal with him. However, under his murderous gaze, they kept saying they would never do something so petty, nor dare to do that to a Baskerville family member. It was just a test of his vice-consul status, to see if he was worthy of their support. But immediately after, he punched hard into the stomach of the one who had spoken, causing him to double over, clutching his belly. For only a master can test his own dog. But when the situation is reversed, it only proves the dog has become disobedient. At that point, the master must punish it accordingly. He said it seemed they didn't know what fear was. Just because they had some money and power, they dared to behave this way because they had never truly felt terror. Then he threw one of them to the ground and stomped on his head. After that, he coldly asked the remaining ones, "Do you know why he ended up like that? If you still don't know, then that will also be your fate." But those wretches kept mumbling that they knew he was wrong, so he was punished. Vicar coldly said that if they knew, then they needed a proper lesson. Immediately he used his foot to crush the skull of the one under his foot. The young masters were terrified but still threatened him, asking if he thought he could get away with this. Messing with their nobility wouldn't be so easy. But in truth, he really wanted to know what they would do. They had kidnapped, killed, traded slaves right on Baskerville lands, and even threatened the vice-consul appointed by the family. They would have to be immediately executed. Then, he gave an evil smile to the remaining ones and said, "It seems this city still has too many disobedient dogs. You can't tame an animal without teaching it an unforgettable lesson. It's time to punish these filthy animals who don't know what fear is." After dealing with them, he told Chihuahua to lock them all up in the dungeon. But even in prison, they kept screaming and making loud threats. The loud-mouthed blonde one said, "Hey punk, you think you can get away with this? I'll tell my father about this. Just wait till I get out of here. I'll kill you. I'll never forgive you." Clearly they were too satisfied with their luxurious life, to the point of forgetting who the real master of these lands was. In the dungeon, Chihuahua started telling him the noble families wouldn't let this go, but he didn't care at all, because this was just the beginning of how he would deal with them. Those mayors had once wanted to stop corruption in some areas and improve life there, but now they themselves had become tainted, even eyeing the Baskerville family's power. He would make the noble families remember the terror of the Baskerville Bloodsword Knights. At the same time, he really needed their resources and money to increase his own strength. But looking at how these nobles were mouthing off, it was clear they still hadn't learned their lesson. Then he looked at Chihuahua and said, at sunset, he would personally execute all these beasts. He would also take the opportunity to eliminate those involved. The young masters were terrified, begging him to spare their lives and offering all their wealth. But for those colluding with underground organizations, leeching off the family, he would not give them a chance. Moreover, their families would not dare make a sound. Chihuahua asked if he had evidence, but he said he had his own ways, telling him not to worry about it. In fact, if he couldn't find evidence, he could just create it. He didn't care about the consequences anyway. Because a great upheaval was about to happen in the world, he would soon be on the battlefield. So he had to quickly resolve everything here, while also acquiring enough resources to increase his strength. Even if he didn't go to the battlefield, he would be admitted to the academy and continue surviving. After swiftly eliminating these pests, this city would gradually change. Only then could he leave with peace of mind. But the young masters still wouldn't give up. They claimed he had no evidence to prove those things were caused by them. Hearing that, he gave an evil laugh and said, "Will you accept the punishment if there is evidence? You're speaking as if you've committed the crime but there's no evidence for it." After that, the blonde one fell silent, seeming unwilling to tarnish his family's reputation, even if he had to die. At this moment, a bald man entered the prison, carrying a bag of items. Reporting that he had completed the task assigned, he couldn't help but praise the man for arriving so timely. Next, he hoped they could play with him a little longer. Opening the bag, it contained torture tools. The bald man laughed and asked, "I've been torturing for 30 years now, but this is the first time I've seen these new toys. How did you come up with such interesting tools?" Vicar said he didn't invent them, but these were very common where he used to be. He then offered to teach the bald man some fun tricks if he wanted, but the man declined. These tools were what he had used to torture political prisoners to reveal military secrets and the torture techniques developed while dealing with the demons. He took off his coat and walked up to the young masters, asking, "What will happen if you don't open your mouths? Please don't say anything, so I can reminisce about old times." In no time, under his verbal and physical torture, the local rich kids confessed their crimes before sunset. The entire city was in an uproar. This was a power game between the new politician and the native families. Everything could only end when the native families bowed before him. As the people had predicted, the 7 great families in the city of Underdog had all sent a few small apology gifts to the new vice-consul. The local wealthy had decided to provide him with a large sum of gold. The people thought those scumbags would be released, and would only receive scolding from their fathers, the heads of the families. But after sunset, he still ordered their execution. He even had their belongings and confessions displayed on the busiest street in the city, to warn the families who had brazenly committed such atrocities. They were punished according to their respective crimes, including branding, amputation, and their bodies thrown outside the city walls. Those who said he would release the rich kids now had to fear his brutal ruling methods. They didn't expect him to actually kill so many prestigious scions. This was also the first time in Underdog City that members of the native families faced legal punishment. All the laws he enacted were ironclad for them. Any violator would be duly punished. Now he was in the consulate, looking out and saying, "There's no need to debate when these laws have existed. But in reality, these criminals are renowned local nobles, so the law needs some adjustment." After receiving this declaration of war, the nobles would certainly start making plans. Once this war broke out, it would only end when one side was decimated. Underdog City would become a bloodbath. He told Chihuahua to prepare himself, as he would be part of the next plan. A few days later, outside the city suburbs, Chihuahua, disguised as a Mablanc family member, wearing a mask, advanced forward. Behind him was him, disguised as a beautiful young slave girl in an iron cage. They were now heading to a circus outside the city to participate in a slave auction. Normally, this was an underground auction the Baskerville family didn't attend. Captured savages, nobles, and commoners would be traded and sold. When the auction opened, countless slaves and goods brought by nobles and merchants poured in. He too became part of that. After entering, a man wearing a jester mask began pricing everyone's goods. Seeing Chihuahua, the masked man immediately recognized him as a Mablanc, right? The emblem and beautiful handwriting on the name card solely represented the Mablanc family. The masked man realized Chihuahua wanted to sell something, saying the Mablancs had always been valued customers who brought them many slaves. He only asked that in case Chihuahua was disappointed with what he bought last time. Chihuahua sweated. He could only say he was always satisfied with the slaves here. The masked man looked at him and said, "Black hair, red eyes, truly a rare commodity." He assured Chihuahua that he would fetch a good price. After an inspection, he was chosen as the last item to be presented. As night completely fell on the circus, a cruel, chaotic auction was about to begin. The buyers said there was a trend for selling strange slaves, while some only craved beautiful slaves. The masked man also said he hoped everyone would find good merchandise here. Here, all kinds of goods were auctioned, even hellish cattle. The participants were also very wealthy, either from the native families or underground organizations. Finally, the hell cow was bought for 250 million gold. Now the next item was brought onto the stage. It was a young girl from the deep mountain tribe of La Rouge, a Balak savage. Despite enduring countless tortures and being sold as a slave, her gaze remained icy cold, sending chills down one's spine. Everyone knew that savage slaves could never be tamed. They always tried to tear their masters apart. But the jester on stage still tried to say that training an unruly slave was quite interesting. That was an opportunity for everyone to showcase their training skills. No matter how low the starting price the jester on stage announced, no one dared bid for this savage girl. At this point, the jester became annoyed, signaling for someone backstage to get rid of her and bring out the best merchandise. A moment later, the warrior tribe girl was knocked unconscious by a muscular man and carried away. After the girl was taken away, the jester began to ease the tense atmosphere and said the best item of this auction would be brought out next. As he finished speaking, Vicar stepped onto the stage. His long black hair, blazing red eyes, youthful handsome face and balanced physique made the wealthy ladies in the audience squeal with delight. The jester then began introducing, "This is an extremely rare black-haired, red-eyed youth, a virgin boy who has never been exploited. Moreover, he clearly doesn't need much training effort. Top quality." But before he could announce the starting price, the wealthy ladies in the audience couldn't contain themselves. One raised a placard bidding 600 million gold. The man behind her even stood up, bidding 800 million. Seeing the man trying to outbid her, the old lady immediately argued with him, but he said he wanted to buy him as a warrior slave. More and more people raised placards to join the auction, until the owner of placard number 99 bid 6 billion. The entire audience fell dead silent. This person was Count Gambino, who came from the granary territory. Vicar heard people murmuring that he had devoured all the underground forces and rapidly expanded his influence. His finances were not to be trifled with. Now he looked at him on stage with lustful eyes, but his female bodyguard warned him if he was overspending. He immediately scolded her, saying that for such a beautiful slave, if he sold him in the capital, it would be very profitable. He would make a huge sum if he resold him. The 6 billion price made many people not dare to speak up. In the end, he was bought by him at an astronomical gold price. When he stood before Gambino, he grinned at him, saying he wasn't a bad person. He was even thinking of many ways to play with him. He even drooled, saying he was really looking forward to it. But his attitude had pushed his patience to the limit. Next, he raised the chain wrapped around his arm high. He thought he wanted him to unchain him, but immediately, to his astonished gaze, he broke the chain and emanated a powerful aura, blowing him backwards. Seeing him sprawled on the ground, he approached and asked if he wanted to play a game called Shield and Spear. He would be the spear, and he would be the shield. If he could survive, he would win. He would be very fierce, so he should try to endure. Next, Gambino's screams of terror like a slaughtered pig echoed throughout the circus. But before he could call for his guards to rescue him, he had already torn him apart on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere. Blood splashed onto the beautiful, horrified face of the female bodyguard. To everyone's shock, he slowly removed his wig. Now everyone recognized who he was, Vicar of the Baskerville family, the current vice-consul of Underdog City. His eerie tone rang out. His beloved Count was too frail. Just one tear and he died. He hadn't played enough yet. Everyone was terrified. Even his secretary, Chihuahua, didn't expect him to cause such a big incident. Now he laughed maniacally at everyone. "This place is a circus, isn't it? Quite a fitting name for tonight. Don't any of you think you can get out safely? So, before he's had enough fun, you absolutely must not think of escaping." After tearing Gambino apart, he turned to challenge everyone in the circus. The jester hosting the auction was completely surprised by his appearance, but he noticed he wasn't holding a sword. Whether he was from Baskerville or the vice-consul, he didn't care. He immediately ordered his men to attack him, but as they were about to charge at him, the bloodthirsty nature of the Beelzebub blade in his right hand became apparent. His subordinates didn't expect him to be so strong at only a dozen or so years old. In an instant, he swung his blade, blood spraying everywhere. This would be a lesson for future enemies. Now the jester realized he had angered a blood-drenched evil king. The masked muscular man who handled the warrior tribe girl earlier was clearly not satisfied with him. Seeing his eagerness, he would grant his wish. But with just one look, his eyes were filled with endless horror. But it was too late. In an instant, he sliced him and his iron hammer into 2 pieces. Even Chihuahua didn't expect his swordsmanship to be so powerful. What's a crowd to him? The more commoners, the more excited he became. seeing him slaughter like the Grim Reaper. The jester realized immediately that he was not someone they could defeat. But Chihuahua, who sat with him on the viewing platform, worried for his safety, jumped down. He didn't expect that although not reaching the Baskerville Patriarch's level, he could still completely control the situation. That very action made the jester think of a way to save himself. However, at this moment he was still enjoying massacring the useless people in the circus. But the jester's manic voice cut through his actions. It turned out the jester had taken his beloved secretary hostage, Chihuahua, to threaten him to surrender immediately. Faced with the jester's threat, he slowly sheathed the Beelzebub blade and coldly looked at him. Fortunately, the surrounding enemies were terrified by his brutality, not daring to take the opportunity to attack him. But Chihuahua's next action left him utterly surprised. He voluntarily moved closer to the jester's short blade, saying he should ignore him, for he would rather die than implicate him. This also made the jester jump back in alarm, but he laughed, saying his words and expression didn't match. But he still praised Chihuahua's loyalty. He told him not to worry, for not only was he valued by Hugo, but he had also joined the elite group, the lower house. How could he come here unprepared? Before coming, he had received a gift from the patriarch. He brought the whistle tied to his calf to his mouth. Next, he took a deep breath and blew hard into it, leaving the jester utterly bewildered and terrified. Immediately, a deafening sound rang out throughout the auditorium. Everyone was dazed by the whistle's sound. As the whistle gradually faded, the people in the circus gradually regained their composure. The jester, seeing nothing had happened, also breathed a sigh of relief. He thought he was just trying to scare him, but just as he was about to threaten him, a sword pierced through his throat. The sudden event left the jester standing still, but before he could react, his head was severed from his neck, decapitated from behind by a hound of the Baskerville family. Chihuahua, looking at the jester's corpse, was also so shocked that he couldn't utter a word. Seeing the jester dead, the surrounding commoners immediately charged at the Baskerville hound, but in an instant they were sliced into countless pieces of flesh, which fell onto those preparing to attack next. A bunch of trash, daring to wield bows against the blood-stained Baskerville knights. Truly a foolish choice. At this moment, nimble, rhythmic footsteps echoed from outside the circus, and the majestic Baskerville Wolfhound cavalry appeared. Each of them was a cold-blooded hunter who had passed the family's graduation exam. They were the terror in the hearts of underground organizations. A woman recognized them as the Empire's most brutal night order, the Apocalypse Squad. They were Baskerville's Wolfhound hunters. Their appearance meant tonight would be drenched in blood. But at this moment, a Wolfhound hunter had already approached her from behind. As he was about to behead her, he suddenly appeared, stopping that hound's action, for keeping her alive was still useful to him. Seeing him, the Wolfhound hunter released Gambino's female guard and immediately knelt before him. At this moment, he ordered all the hunters. Those who remained still would be temporarily spared, but if anyone dared to move, they would be executed without mercy. Upon his order, the hunters immediately acted. They ruthlessly killed those trying to escape. A terrified nobleman crawled on the ground, begging the hunters to spare his life, and agreed to be handcuffed. But the Wolfhound squad didn't carry handcuffs, nor did they offer that service. The only way to keep enemies still was to sever their legs. For the hunters, those to be executed didn't need legs. At this moment, a burly man approached him from behind. It was his uncle, Boston Terrier Le Baskerville. He was the commander of the Wolfhound squad, and he asked how he felt about using the Wolfhound squad. He came to see the family's #1 genius, whom his arrogant brother Hugo had to respect, and what he was truly like. Indeed, he was very pleased to see Vicar more decisive and ruthless than other 15-year-olds. He expressed his desire for him to join his Wolfhound squad and would definitely value him highly. However, for now he had more important matters, so he only said he would consider it. After bidding farewell to his uncle, he prepared to leave to handle an urgent matter. But his indifference only made Boston Terrier want to recruit him into the Wolfhound squad even more. As for him, he only felt that this uncle was truly quite troublesome. After the hunters took control of the circus, he went into the back storeroom. It was time to collect the spoils of war. There was something he needed here. As soon as he entered, he saw a safe containing a large amount of money, perfect to cover the previous expenses. Just a little later, Once he brought it to the city hall, this year's tax issue would be resolved. He felt terrible thinking about how much funding the Baskerville family had provided to those scoundrels. But that wasn't his main objective. Next, he lifted the cloth covering an iron cage nearby. But what was inside surprised him quite a bit. It was the warrior girl from Manhwa Recape before, so she was still alive. It was an unexpected surprise that delighted him. But her body was covered in wounds, probably punishment for trying to escape. He didn't know how she would react upon waking up and seeing him, but seeing her pitiful state, and her still clinging to life, today he supposed he had to be a good person for once. Anyway, she was very lucky. In her physical condition, she would certainly die in a little while. But fortunately, he was carrying the life essence his Uncle Boston Terrier had just given him. He immediately made her drink it. Soon after, her body glowed bright red, and the wounds on her body healed. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and woke up. As he had predicted, when she saw him unlock her cage, the wild girl became terrified. Fortunately, in his previous life, he had fought countless times against the wild tribes, so he knew some of their basic language. Thus, he used the wild language to tell her to leave this place. But the girl still hesitated, unsure if he was deceiving her or not. Worried about delays causing what he needed to disappear, he gestured for the girl to quickly escape. Without stopping, but unexpectedly, she spoke a long passage that he couldn't understand. Although he knew some of the wild language, he couldn't comprehend when she spoke too much. Fortunately, seeing he meant no harm, the girl prepared to leave. But before going out, she said something he could clearly understand this time. She wanted to thank him and said she would definitely meet him again. After the girl left, he began searching for the necessary items. Finally, he found the most important thing: the corpse of the hellish bovine from the previous auction. Since the experience 8 years ago, it had been a long time since he and his sword Beelzebub had tasted the purebred blood of such a top-tier demonic beast. His sword could no longer suppress the hunger that had been smoldering within for so long. He was worried the wolfhound squad would arrive soon, so he told his sword to eat quickly. Soon after, his sword absorbed the special skill of the hellish bovine. This trip was truly a fruitful harvest. On the second day after dealing with the incident at the slave auction, the whole city was rumoring that the new vice-consul had swiftly handled the criminals. Rumors spread that the nobles involved in the illegal slave auction activities, and those who organized the event, had all been sent to prison with their limbs severed. That night, he and the Wolfhound squad searched and eliminated the largest demon cult in Underdog City. The furnace had been burned down along with their cult, completely vanishing, while the heads of the VIP guests were also displayed outside as a warning against any criminal acts. When the 7 native families didn't see their sons return, they wrote letters of complaint to the consul. But the answer he gave was that participating in illegal slave trading was prohibited, so execution was the only outcome. After witnessing his brutal ruling methods, and hearing that he would submit all the evidence collected to the royalty, the elders of the native families all knelt before the consulate, bowing their heads and begging him to forgive their families. It was truly ironic to see them having to apologize to the one who killed their sons. He thought there could be nothing worse than this. However, Vikir's answer was very simple. We have investigated the black book hidden in the Hellfire. You have violated the Baskerville autonomous law, therefore, your assets will be confiscated, and to pay for your treachery, you will be exiled from the 3 tribes. They have broken the law and trifled with the Baskerville family. How could they have a chance to survive? Under the new vice-consul's rule, for several days, blood continuously spilled on the execution grounds. The blood of the vermin was cleansed from the city. After dealing with the families, there was always a shortage of manpower in the city hall's affairs, helping to reduce the unemployment rate in Underdog. With the money obtained from punishing illegal activities, the city's welfare was restored. Meanwhile, the public support for Vikir and Underdog kept increasing. A few days later, Chihuahua happily brewed coffee for him, but he just told him to focus on managing the office. No need to bother bringing coffee to him, but he said this was his way of thanking him for saving his life at the auction. But he just smiled and said 1 cup of coffee for his life was a bit cheap. But he still laughed and said this coffee had 2 sugar cubes, 2 spoons of cream and just a bit of water, so it wasn't cheap. At this point, Chihuahua asked him how his writing practice was going. He handed him a piece of paper to see. He didn't expect that he had only been learning this writing style for a short time, but his level was already very good. Chihuahua thought to himself that he was someone who amazed others. He could create highly effective new laws from the few things he had learned, and he also understood how to properly enforce the laws. He hoped that if he continued to work like this underdog city could develop even further. Finally, after finishing the day's work, he went to the prison of the consulate. After a few busy days, he had forgotten that the female guard was still imprisoned here. Through investigating her and Duke Gambino, he knew her real name was Cindy Wendy Sen Rose, and she was largely responsible for the Duke's rapid rise. She always found it hard to understand why he didn't kill her, but the reason he kept her was because he had a few questions to ask her. This woman had helped Duke Gambino earn a lot of money, because according to him, a fool like that couldn't have done it himself. He also thought that someone with such talent for making money could put their skills to use elsewhere. She could become a skilled merchant or investor. He asked her how she had helped the Duke get rich, but she simply said that the enormous sum of money was indeed earned under her management. After that, she fell silent. He coldly stood up and said he needed to know the specific process and clear details. She needed to cherish this chance to survive. Cindy Wendy agreed to answer his questions. First, Vicar only asked if she thought he was doing a good job, and received an affirmative answer from her, but he said he couldn't keep his word if she still didn't answer honestly. At this point, Cindy Wendy gritted her teeth and said she thought he was going in the wrong direction. Only then did he sneer, stepped closer, lifted her chin, looked straight into her eyes and asked why she said that. Where had he gone wrong? After reminding her of her position, he released his hand from her chin. Next was to see if her defense could convince him. Cindy Wendy angrily gritted her teeth. Seeing him sit down on the chair in front of her, she pondered and said, "A while ago, for a consul, one of the main reasons when making important decisions was propriety. When he created laws to punish criminals and increase his own prestige, many people would die and be injured by those laws. In the long run, he would be hated and resented by the people. At the same time, the Baskerville family would not welcome him when the city's people's affection for him surpassed their loyalty to the family. In the end, the consequence he would receive is the hatred of the people and the suspicion of the family." Hearing that, he was also interested in asking her what she thought he should do next. She frankly said that he should return all the privileges he obtained from the Baskerville family, including the honor he gained after this incident. He should hand it back to the family head, and to avoid drawing attention, he should go to Mount La Rouge or the Imperial Central Academy. Those are the places someone of his age and family background should go. He should try to hide his strength as well as his identity. When the time comes, the Baskerville clan leader will take responsibility for him. Undeniably, this woman's mind was truly excellent. Her advice was almost in line with his previous thoughts, but he was the hunting dog of the family. Doing that would be betraying his master. Hugo was no fool. How could he forgive him at that time? But Cindy Wendy didn't hesitate to say that. That was the only way for a hunting dog like him to avoid becoming the clan leader's enemy. Hearing that, he didn't get angry but laughed and said he would remember her words. Then he happily took out the key to unlock her handcuffs, while praising her idea as wonderful, and said that she shared the same thoughts as him. And he kept his promise because her speech was truly excellent. But until this point, she still doubted why he would let her go. But the fact that he kept his word was known to everyone in the city. Cindy Wendy said she hoped he would never regret this decision. As she was about to leave, she suddenly heard him ask if she had ever heard of the Messamediurano family. Vicar turned to look at her and answered that there used to be many great families in Underdog, not just the 7 major families, among which was a powerful merchant family. That was the 8th great family, the Messamediurano family. However, this family disappeared in an unfortunate incident. Hearing his words, her fists clenched tightly. It turned out that the youngest son of the Messamediurano family performed the new swordsmanship he had learned on his birthday. When the performance began, those from the Baskerville family couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The swordsmanship that child demonstrated was the secret swordsmanship of the Baskerville family, known only to members of the family. This news then reached the ears of the Baskerville clan leader. They determined that the military secret had been leaked out, so the Baskerville family unleashed their hunting dogs, causing the annihilation of the Messamediurano family in one night. However, the truth was that someone had pulled the strings behind all this. It was the evil young masters of the 7 major families who stole the Baskerville swordsmanship and had the youngest son of the Messamediurano family learn it. Cindy Wendy listened to his words and tried to appear calm, saying that the story of that family had nothing to do with her. He continued, however, the Messamediurano family still had a survivor, because that group of youths had saved a 1-year-old girl, only because she was too beautiful, after which she endured inhumane torture. Immediately, Cindy Wendy cut off his story. She seemed angry, intending to leave the prison right away. But he said the story had many more plots, like how a cruel vice consul later came to the city. He used brutal methods to obtain much criminal evidence from that group of youths. Among them was evidence proving they had harmed the Messamediurano family. And that was when those demons begged for forgiveness for committing such heinous crimes. At this point, Cindy Wendy stopped. Her eyes were welling up with tears. She angrily shouted, "Apologize? Who were they apologizing to?" He said, of course, to the girl using the alias Cindy Wendy, sole survivor of the Messamediurano family. She growled, asking how he could be sure his words were true, and whether those scumbags were truly punished. He simply lit the torch in his hand and told her to look back into the adjacent cell to understand. The sight before her left Cindy Wendy in disbelief. In front of her were the headless corpses of the group of youths who had once abused her. Their bodies were covered in horrific scars from torture. Moreover, on the walls and floor were carved words like, "We are the ones who caused the death of the Messamediurano family. Please forgive our sins. We apologize, we apologize, we apologize. We are so scared. We don't want to die." Cindy Wendy couldn't hold back her tears, collapsing to the ground in sobs. Seeing this girl with such a tragic fate, he felt a bit of sympathy, but he told her that he had already helped her take revenge on those families. However, the Messamediurano family's vengeance was not over, for the enemy she resented the most was still there, the Baskerville family, and he said she still had much to do to take revenge. Cindy Wendy wiped her tears, angrily asking why he, being from the Baskervilles, would help her, but he told her she had asked the wrong question. Some things are best not known too much about. At this point, Cindy Wendy stood up and said she would definitely repay this kindness of his. She even promised him that in the future, he wouldn't need to worry about money, for she would provide him with as much money as he wanted. He happily replied that he would remember this promise well. That was what he truly wanted, an outstanding business genius. And she also hated the Baskerville family. 3 days after dealing with Cindy Wendy's matter, when Chihuahua pushed open his room door, he saw a bloody mess everywhere. Hearing the noise, he woke up but was covered in blood. Chihuahua asked about the dead body on the floor. He said last night some fearless worms came to disturb him, so he killed them while half asleep. After cleaning up, he and Chihuahua prepared to go handle some business. He also pondered the recent strange occurrences. It seemed there were many things obstructing his path. Someone wanted to kill him. The dangers he had faced recently included being shot with 2 poisoned arrows, a maid giving him poisoned drink, and 3 other poisoning attempts, as well as acid, snipers, arson, assassination attempts, intentional car crashes and more. Although those didn't endanger him, it was clear someone was deliberately harassing him. He decided to investigate these strange events after handling his business. From the previous illegal auction, he had risked obtaining the Hell Ox's tenacious life skill. It seemed better than he thought, thanks to the sticks and tenacious life enhancing his body. Even Grand Lancer-level assassins couldn't pierce his flesh. But just as he and Chihuahua were discussing, an exquisite, luxurious carriage stopped before them, bearing the Baskerville family flag. The person getting out was the butler Barrymore, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Seeing the familiar butler, he cheerfully greeted him. Beside him, Chihuahua looked at the butler with fear. After all, only someone like Hugo could make this high-ranking butler come to such a remote place himself. Speaking of this butler, he was the most outstanding head butler of the Barrymore family, whose family had held this position for 4 generations. Even in a place like the Baskerville family, a single small mistake could lead to death. Chihuahua was overjoyed, never expecting to meet Barrymore here. As for him, he understood the purpose of this butler's visit. It seemed Hugo had heard of his achievements in Underdog City, and ordered Barrymore to bring him back to their territory, also appearing very pleased with his exploits. The butler's attitude towards him now, he was certainly going to be rewarded something. He hoped this achievement would give him a chance to enter the Empire's greatest academy, Colosseo. Still, he now looked forward even more to meeting Hugo again. A few days later, he returned to the family with the butler. Meeting him, Hugo continuously praised what he had done in Underdog City. Moreover, he had received many honorific titles as commendations from the people in the newspapers. Thanks to him, everyone in the Empire understood that the Baskerville Bloodsword Knights were not just a bunch of sword-wielding brutes. However, in front of Hugo, he did not show arrogance, only saying that it was what he had to do. After praising his work ability, Hugo announced a reward that both surprised and delighted him. He decided to allow him to enroll early at the Empire's Colosseo Academy. It was where the Empire's elite gathered. It was where the children of nobles and royalty studied, and to ensure security, students were required to stay in the school's dormitories. This school assembled the entire Empire's finest. By entering, he could increase his strength, while also avoiding Hugo's watchful eye. Hugo also said he would select a few people to go with him, but he wanted him to decide for himself. After some thought, he decided to have the three blonde brothers accompany him to the Imperial Academy. But in his heart, he secretly planned to use them as punching bags. After hearing his decision, Hugo also agreed to let the three blonde brothers follow him into the academy. But he asked if he still remembered the plan from when he was 8 years old, targeting the ruby mine. Of course he remembered. Now Hugo said that plan could be fully implemented, because the Morg family had agreed to an alliance with the Baskervilles against the barbarians. That plan had succeeded. Ever since handing over the ruby mine to the Morg family, they had also faced many troubles from the barbarian tribes in La Rouge, but most of it was due to the oppression of the two families, forcing the barbarians to retreat to the border regions. Now the Morg family had proposed a punitive expedition, which they were eagerly awaiting. Now Hugo told him to go survey the border area before enrolling to assess the territorial situation. Also, to strengthen the friendship between the two sides, and check if the laws he enacted were being well enforced. It would be a good experience for him. After all, Underdog City was located near the border, and some of the Morg family's fortresses were under his jurisdiction. So he agreed to Hugo's proposal. This trip might allow him to meet Camus Morg again. After making the necessary arrangements, he returned to Underdog City. At this time, Chihuahua was tiredly seeing him off. He also promised to manage everything well in the city while he was gone. He knew he would have to part with Chihuahua soon, and he felt reluctant. But Hugo's reward this time brought him much closer to his goal after many years. He had to seize this opportunity. Leaving the city, he ordered all the present members of the hound hunting squad to assemble. There was no need to hide anymore. The man before him was Captain Stafford of the Hound Hunting Squad. They would ensure his safe passage to the Morg family's fortress. He apologized for making Stafford wait, but he didn't want the parting to become too chaotic. At this time, he asked the captain about his uncle Boston Terrier's recent situation, but he said his uncle had nearly gone mad from wanting him to join the Hound Hunting Squad. Ever since the incident at the slave circus, Uncle Boston Terrier had been obsessed with getting him to join his hound hunting squad, but he still hadn't agreed, as he had many other things to do. After assembling with the hound hunting squad, he began his patrol. Along the way, he saw that everyone was abiding by the laws. Venturing deeper, they soon reached the city rented by the Morg family. According to the hound hunting squad's intelligence, the Morg family had sent many important figures here. They had organized a team comprising the three largest families, 30 members from smaller families, and hundreds of mages from other nameless families. They valued the ruby mine much more than they had thought. Meanwhile, their patrol team only consisted of him and a few dozen hound hunting squad members. Notably, the Baskerville family only sent a group of knights and him, a member of a smaller family. Those from the upper class on the other side of the mountain. He secretly thought, as Hugo had said, considering the barbarians' lives wasn't a bad idea. Venturing deeper into the border region, they soon saw a deserted city appear. but on the thorn bushes outside the city walls, they were hung with pale white human skulls. Evidently, over the years, the Morg family had not been idle either. This was their warning to the barbarians. This scene reminded him of the former witch queen Camus. She alone had wiped out all the barbarians in Le Rouge. He wondered if 7 years later, she would be even more beautiful, more alluring. But surely by now she must be very powerful too. However, when they reached the city gates, 3 triplet girls on the city walls aggressively blocked their entry. He recognized them as the Morg triplet sisters. They were also genius mages. In their previous life, they were infamous for their arrogance and conceit, even within their family. Just one of them was crazy enough. Now that they were together, their madness had risen to new heights. Seeing their arrogance, he immediately introduced himself as the Baskerville family's envoy, only here to inspect the territory and strengthen friendly relations between the two sides. But the triplet sisters clearly wanted to make trouble, saying they had to report to the leadership before allowing them in. They told them to come back tomorrow. He was truly exasperated by this attitude. It seemed they still didn't know whose territory they were in, and now he was gradually losing control of his anger. How dare they forbid him from entering his own city? They were still arrogant because of the Baskerville family's tenant protection law, thinking he wouldn't dare do anything to them. But he said he would change the rules immediately and evict any tenants he disliked. His cold voice rang in their ears. Open the gates immediately, or die. This is your last chance. Simultaneously, his terrifying murderous intent enveloped and completely overwhelmed them. Only then did they realize he was the infamous Mad Consul. They disliked him to begin with, so they immediately unleashed their spells, boasting that they would teach this madman a lesson. Faced with their contemptuous attitude, he calmly evaded by steering his horse to the side. But those 3 useless sisters still brazenly declared this was the Morg family's private territory, forbidding outsiders from trespassing. Captain Stafford beside him said it seemed they couldn't enter without a fight today. He completely agreed with the captain's view. But at that moment, 3 very familiar voices rang out from the hound hunting squad ranks behind him. They loudly refuted whether the Morgs knew who the real master here was. He guessed who they were, just didn't expect they had been hiding in the hound hunting squad all along. Hearing this, the triplet sisters were furiously enraged, seeing it as an insult to the Morg family's honor. Next, 3 young men stepped out from the hound hunting squad ranks behind him. They were the family's 3 blonde brothers, but seeing them appear in such an awkward manner, he deeply regretted not smashing their pig heads earlier. He only felt his troubles increasing when these 3 clowns loudly proclaimed they would handle this conversation. This was the first unexpected incident since his return. Those who jumped out in front were the very ones who had caused him calamity in his previous life. But now, the 3 detestable blonde brothers actively clung to him. Even the eldest winked at him, thanking him for recommending them to the Colosio Academy. So he left those triplet sisters to them. The reason he recommended them was just to use them as punching bags for practice. Unexpectedly, the one who used to admire him had volunteered for this protection mission. In the previous life, these 3 blonde brothers became formidable killing weapons. Their brains were somewhat dull, but they always excelled at completing assigned tasks. Perhaps they would be useful later. When he expressed confidence in those 3 blonde brothers, the triplet sisters immediately perked up and mocked that only fools gathered together. Soon after, the 2 monster groups from the 2 families began a saliva battle. In this regard, he had to admit the blonde brothers' innate talents. The first round ended in victory for the blonde brothers. When it came to the actual battle, the triplet sisters on the other side had reacted first. They used the type of magic they considered their strongest. These 3 sisters were water, grass, and earth mages. The 3 excellent types of magic combined would increase their power tenfold. One used water magic to moisten the soil, one used earth magic to soften the ground, and the last used grass magic to restore the vegetation. So these 3 sisters were also called the 3 flowers of the Morg family. With their seamless coordination, giant vines suddenly grew from the city gates, reaching towards the sky. But the 3 blonde Baskerville brothers didn't let their guard down. The eldest charged forward, using the first Baskerville light slashing technique, swiftly cutting through the vines in front. Immediately after, the other two joined the battle. Magic uses the surrounding mana to simulate and amplify the power of the elements many times over, while swordsmanship uses the mana within one's body as energy to create explosive power. And today, the triplet sisters and brothers represented the two sides of the debate. Although all six fought fiercely to defend their family's honor, to him, it was just a feeling of boredom. Stafford beside him said that Vicar had far surpassed these people. In his heart, he just wanted them to die quickly so he could meet the person in charge. There were still many things that needed to be discussed. Now it was just a waste of time. At that moment, a violent explosion suddenly occurred, sweeping the battlefield clean, immediately interrupting the battle of those six. The surroundings instantly turned to ash and dust. When the three blonde brothers ran over, their hair was frizzed and blackened from the blast. At the same time, he heard the pitiful cries of the triplet sisters on the other side. Then everyone turned towards the direction of the incoming fire spell. As everyone's gaze focused there, a deep and cold, yet slightly immature voice rang out. Not long after, the one who summoned the flames appeared before everyone. It was the future lady of the Morgue family, Camus. She said anyone who caused trouble in her territory would not be forgiven. As she landed on the ground, the three injured sisters trembled, quickly explaining that they only wanted to stop the intruders, and it was they who provoked them first. But before they could finish, the girl coldly glared at them with a threatening gaze, saying if they didn't want to become roasted meat, it was best they didn't act recklessly again. Camus was also furious that the triplets dared to call her an empty shell. Hearing that, the three sisters trembled and quickly corrected themselves, calling her commander, before disappearing from the battlefield. Then Camus turned towards them, and the girl who had just exuded a terrifying aura, now gently stepped in front of him, abruptly changing her attitude, and said shyly, "Long time no see, Vicar van Baskerville." This was their first meeting after 7 years. Compared to her intelligent, sharp image from before, Camus had changed a lot. The moles and fangs on her face had disappeared. Although her cheeks still retained some baby fat, this was the beauty that could captivate the hearts of all noblemen in the future. Subconsciously, Camus despised the men bewitched by her beauty, while toying with their feelings, inciting competition and conflict between families. These rumors had caused a sensation in the previous life society. But in this life, until now he had not heard any scandals about her. At this moment, he did not mention his previous life's memories, but said to Camus, "Open the city gates." Those three girls did not listen to what I said, but unexpectedly, his first words angered the girl in front of him. She pointed at him and said, "After so many years, that's the first thing you say to me?" In his bewildered gaze and the question of what should I say, she choked up, "Is that any way to treat your future wife? You've already lost points." Stafford thought to himself, after the trio's battle, will there be a battle between the two stars of the families? Under the confused gazes of those present, Camus blushed slightly in embarrassment. It turned out Camus still carried the outfit he had gifted her 8 years ago. The genius mage treated it as a treasure, always keeping it by her side. Even until now, that outfit had never been washed. At this moment, he and Camus rode their horses side by side at a leisurely pace. Camus kept asking him all sorts of questions. First was about his knowledge of the savages. When he answered that due to territorial issues, the two sides often clashed, so he understood them better, Camus asked why he only brought these young hunters. She thought he hadn't received the notice, so she explained that their main forces had secretly ambushed on the other side of the mountain range. But when he mentioned that, she said she had known for a long time, and was actually probing to see if he knew the inner secrets of the Baskerville family. It turned out she was testing whether he was an abandoned member of the family. Fortunately, he didn't hide anything, telling the truth. She then looked at him, smiling with her eyes narrowed, and praised, "It seems the family trusts you a lot." Next, she threw out another question, asking which savage tribe in this area gave him the most trouble. This little girl kept asking him all sorts of things along the way. Although a bit tiring, he still answered everything he knew. In this area, there were two powerful tribes. One was the warrior-focused Balak tribe, and the other was the mage-focused Rococo tribe. Especially the Balak tribe had exceptionally powerful archers, at a level far superior to the Empire's, and the origin of this was still not well understood. Hearing that, Camus suddenly said he had a deep understanding of the ecological environment of the savage tribes, so she would give him 8 out of 100 points. This made him even more puzzled. He answered well, so why such a low score? Next, the little girl said that men being too smart was meaningless. Men should be silly instead. Moreover, she said she didn't like overly intelligent men. Right after that, she started grading him again. For horseback riding, she gave 8 points, but didn't forget to criticize him for being shorter than her, saying he was riding a horse too big for himself. For his dressing style, like a lump, only 4 points. And that arrogant habit of his, just 1 point. But for growing up to be very handsome, 99 points, -1 for his poor expression. When he firmly interrupted and said she shouldn't grade meaninglessly like that, she reacted sharply that he was her future husband, so this wasn't meaningless. What a headache this little girl was giving him. Afterwards, he looked at her with a puzzled expression and asked why he would be her future husband. At this, she added that maybe he had forgotten passing her test a few years ago. Perhaps she was referring to 7 years ago when he fought the great mage in the training grounds. Back then, he was lucky to use a broken sword fragment to shatter the mage's water flask. That could be considered him passing that test back then. Those things happened a few years ago, but the little girl spoke as if it was just a few days prior. While she was recalling that scene, the girl suddenly spouted fire smoke, angrily saying, "How dare you decide who my husband is with just a small test like that? I'm so annoyed. Because of your decision, my romantic path is completely ruined. Crazy. Since I promised back then, it's like I'm already married. What else can I do? Once I've made a promise, I have to keep my word. I have to obey no matter what. I'm forced to accept this." Finally, she added that she was at a great disadvantage. He looked embarrassedly at the little girl before him, wondering to himself if this was really the future cold-blooded queen. Her fire magic had indeed been trained to the point of being able to self-immolate like that. To avoid further embarrassment, he simply told Camus, "I've forgotten about that day. I can assure it won't happen." But as soon as he finished speaking, Camus' body suddenly froze. Next, she shouted loudly, "How can you change like that, you fool? How can you treat the marriage vow as if it never happened?" At the same time, a piece of cloth covered his face. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed since returning. While he stood dazed holding the cloth in front of his face, the angry little girl stormed off ahead, saying that since she's a genius, she remembers everything she's encountered, unable to forget. Calming down, he realized this was the outfit he wore when he was 8 years old, clearly engraved with the Baskerville family crest. It was the outfit he had draped over Camus' naked body back then. Despite the many years that passed, the outfit still carried the sweat smell from that day, and he couldn't help but frown. This girl, until now, had never washed this outfit even once. Afterwards, Camus calmed down and explained the recent situation. It turned out the savages had been frequently attacking the pink gemstone mining area, plundering the locals and their food supplies. They captured the locals as slaves and sold them at auctions elsewhere. The wall in front was built by mages within a month, truly a masterpiece. Hundreds of ordinary people would struggle to build a wall of that scale even in a year. At this point, the dents on the wall caught his attention. Those were marks left by the Balak tribe archers. According to Camus, the enemy archers all had very strong auras. At night, countless people died after being hit by their arrows. They could even break through walls 2 to 3 meters thick, their prowess not to be underestimated. Not long ago, Camus' cousin was severely wounded in the chest by a powerful arrow. This also reminded him of the scar on Hugo's nose bridge when he first arrived here. Upon investigation, it turned out that the wound on Camus' cousin was also caused by a young girl. But she had blackened her face, so they couldn't identify who she was. They could only guess that it was a girl. At this moment, urgent shouting was heard not far away, interrupting their conversation. It turned out the Morgue family's patrol squad had captured some scouts from the tribe. The man tied up in front was a bald, heavily tattooed individual. From his appearance, it was easy to tell he belonged to the sorcerer tribe. Through the sorceress beside him, they knew this person had strong magical abilities, so even mind control spells couldn't make him reveal anything. Until now, he hadn't divulged any information. Camus stepped forward and asked the prisoner if they remembered kidnapping locals when they previously attacked the Morgue family. Among them was a girl from the Morgue family, Camus' sister named Rose. Upon hearing that, the prisoner, who had his eyes tightly shut, suddenly opened his mouth slightly and smiled triumphantly. Camus' expression immediately turned grave. Unsure whether to confirm what he had heard, she invited a female mage beside her to interpret. But she only understood that this person said when they attacked, everyone had died and been taken away. At this point, he slowly approached and asked the prisoner a question in broken savage language. This once again surprised Camus, because in her imagination, he had to be the all-knowing genius. Then he also inquired in detail about her sister as requested. At this point, the prisoner answered his question with a few brief words. Upon hearing the response, his expression unconsciously froze. Not long after, he regained his composure and told Camus that her sister had died. Hearing his response, Camus' face immediately turned ice cold. She then slowly approached the prisoner and declared the death sentence. At the end of her words, a sharp pillar suddenly grew from the ground, piercing straight through the prisoner's chest. His entire body burst into flickering flames. Agonizing screams echoed throughout the prison. Faced with the cruel scene, Camus coldly added, "When this war ends, your language will become the language of hell." In just a few seconds, the prisoner was burned alive to ashes. Seeing this, the other prisoners stared in fear at the remains. Camus then turned and left without looking back. But when leaving the prison, he was surprised by the scene he witnessed. What surprised him was that now, when no one was around, Camus was quietly crying in a corner. Despite trying to appear strong, she was just a 15-year-old child. It turned out the deceased girl was Camus' beloved 12-year-old sister, a sweet and innocent little girl. He had never felt Rose suited this cold-blooded Morgue family. When he consoled her, saying she shouldn't grieve too much, that her sister had passed away peacefully, she looked at him with angry eyes. That gaze let him know she actually understood the savage language. Not much, but enough to grasp a little. She demanded he repeat the prisoner's answer, wanting to confirm what she had heard. At this point, he didn't want to hide anything from Camus anymore. He could only say slowly, "Your sister Dot was eaten by them. Although that tribe disregards rules, they are also cannibals. Eating prisoners is one of their customs." Hearing this, Camus could no longer hold back. She broke down in sobs of anguish, apologizing repeatedly for failing to protect her beloved sister. Then she could only scream to vent her emotions. Seeing Camus suffer from her sister's loss, he could only stand silently beside her, the cold-blooded Iron Queen on the outside, yet harboring such a fragile inner self. After a period of silence, Camus sat down on the ground, using her sleeve to wipe her face and dry the tear stains on her cheeks. Her expression gradually returned to its original coldness. She said it wasn't a big deal. If the enemy had killed her sister, she would just take their life in return. But now wasn't the time for grieving. She needed to quickly regain her composure to take revenge. Then she looked towards him standing beside her and said that he had handled it well. If he had tried to console her himself earlier, he might have lost his life. Although the 15-year-old girl's threat had no effect on someone who had been through 100 battles like him, but seeing her fragile inner self, he nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to reach out and help her up, both of them simultaneously heard the piercing sound of the alarm horn. It was the warning signal of a tribal attack. For Camus, the time for revenge came sooner than expected. At this moment in the forest surrounding the fortress, a white wolf's paw was stepping on the grassy carpet. Following its gaze, a savage woman riding the white wolf could be clearly seen. In her hand, she held a bow emitting a pale green glow. When she fired an arrow, the grass carpet beneath her feet suddenly levitated. Those who hadn't realized the danger, grasping onto the sturdy earthen wall, suddenly disappeared along with a large hole that appeared when the arrow struck, blasting the wall apart. As the savage warrior woman's shout rang out, a deafening roar echoed back from the edge of the forest. Knife and bow-wielding figures charged straight towards the Morgue family's headquarters. In the blink of an eye, the once peaceful interior of the fortress was filled with indiscriminate slaughter. When he quickly arrived at the battlefield, 2 savage women had already used ropes to strangle him. While using the savage language he could understand to say that this time they were lucky to have caught the perfect husband. It was indeed true to the savage's nature to kidnap outstanding men to be husbands. They wanted to breed a new superior race surpassing the natives. But unfortunately, this time they encountered the wrong person. He would not be their husband. Finishing his words, he forcefully threw the 2 savage women to the ground. At this, the expressions of the male savage warriors immediately changed. They shouted and fired a furious volley of arrows towards him. But he was faster than they expected. He swiftly drew the sword from his waist, tracing exquisite curves, slicing every incoming arrow cleanly in half. Seeing his swordsmanship skills, the awestruck savage warriors froze in their tracks. He thought silently that Hugo had instructed him not to act rashly before he could regroup with the main force. He couldn't start the battle prematurely. Should he wait for the main army to arrive? At that moment, a huge explosion rang out, flames erupting violently. Simultaneously, Camus' voice echoed, "What are you doing? Why don't you just kill them all?" Amidst the agonized groans of the male warriors, Camus slowly emerged from the blaze. Now she stared at them with fierce red eyes. Flames still blazed in the palm of her right hand. Then Camus surveyed the surroundings and turned her gaze towards the sword in his hand. For his sword was emanating the aura of powerful sword ki, a liquid-like aura, meaning he had reached the great firmament realm. Camus sincerely admired, "You truly are the only man I can acknowledge." Then he answered Camus' question. "I received orders from the head of the family to avoid engaging before regrouping with the main force." Camus then said, "Those are orders from the head of the Baskerville clan, right? Then a Baskerville clan member shouldn't intervene in this matter." She simultaneously summoned 4 fire spells, concentrated all her magic power and fired at the savage warriors, roaring that she would eliminate them all herself. Even a genius mage cannot be careless on the battlefield. Camus had gone completely mad with the desire for revenge for her sister. But just as Camus was about to cast her spell, an arrow laced with tranquilizer struck her neck. With the sound of her collapse, Camus lost all ability to move. It turned out the arrow carried a paralytic drug. At the same time, a savage warrior pointed at Camus, gleefully throwing a strangling rope, apparently intending to capture Camus alive. He must have been the one who fired the tranquilizer arrow. When he grabbed the strangling rope, he reminded Camus not to lose her senses due to revenge, and it would be best if they didn't engage in any more battles before the main Baskerville force arrived here. But Camus insisted on taking revenge for her sister who was devoured by the savage tribe. He could only ask her to make a more reasonable decision. Suddenly, an intense sense of danger enveloped him. He swiftly dodged by instinct, and an invisible arrow shot past his face at terrifying speed. This destructive power was indeed like the powerful girl Camus mentioned, who had severely wounded 2 mighty generals of the 2 clans. But just as he was preparing to confront her with all his might, Camus' agonized scream rang out from behind. Turning back, the savage who fired the tranquilizer arrow had seized Camus and was swiftly riding away on a wolf. Memories of his previous life flashed in his mind. In that life, Camus had been kidnapped by the savage tribe when she was young. Of course, not long after, Camus killed them all and returned to the Morgue clan. And it was after that incident that she earned the nickname Queen of La Rouge. Although the scene from his previous life was replaying before his eyes, he couldn't just stand by and let her die. But as he was about to go rescue Camus, a female savage warrior wielding a bow slashed directly at him. The female warrior's appearance seemed familiar to him, but she didn't give him time to ponder further. She kicked him squarely in the stomach. Although he managed to block the attack, he clearly sensed that she was far stronger than the other savage warriors. Despite her face being smeared with soot and ash, he recognized that she was around the same age as Camus. Facing such an opponent, he intended to use his full strength. When he heard the savage female warrior's voice, "I told you we would meet again." Only then did he remember who she was. The girl who was caged like an animal at the slave auction of the circus he had rescued back then. Now she had become such a powerful savage warrior. He then couldn't help but show a serious expression. This was repaying kindness with enmity. Seeming to recognize his intent, she said this was revenge for being enslaved. According to her, Her captivity was inextricably linked to the Morg clan. It's understandable why the Morg clan has always been in conflict with the savages over the issue of mining pink gemstones. Perhaps this large-scale attack was this girl's intentional act of vengeance. Seeing his worried demeanor towards Camus, the savage girl also recognized Camus' distinct status. As she rode off on her wolf, she said she would capture the enemy's leader to make them suffer the same pain she had endured. If he wanted to rescue Camus, he had to follow her. Just as they were leaving, Adolf furiously unleashed a colossal spell, causing the entire area to quake violently. But thanks to the wolf's agility, the savages managed to escape safely without a scratch. Witnessing that scene, Adolf stood motionless in shock. He couldn't believe they could infiltrate and leave the fortress within just 3 minutes, while also capturing Camus of the Morg clan, and the situation became even more complicated due to Camus' carelessness and lack of experience. The developments had exceeded his predictions. At this moment, Adolf looked towards the retreating savages, anxiously jumping up and down. Their dwelling was the forbidden area of Mount Le Rouge, an unexplored and perilous region, where even powerful mysterious creatures appeared at night. Adolf agonized over his granddaughter's capture but felt powerless. When everyone was at a loss, he stepped forward and told Adolf that he could pursue them. His reason was that he had ventured into the Le Rouge forest as a child, so he was somewhat familiar with the terrain. In truth, thanks to his memories from his previous life, he knew most of the area in the forest quite well. Before he finished speaking, Adolf seemed to see a glimmer of hope and was immediately revived. While other Morg clan members advised against entering the Le Rouge forest at night, calling it suicidal, Adolf looked at them with fierce red eyes and said, "Anyone who wants to withdraw can do so. This time, he won't hold them accountable." At this moment, the only thought in Adolf's mind was that he had recognized something extraordinary in him. Moreover, he had no other choice but to trust this young man from the Vicar Baskerville clan. He suddenly grabbed his shoulders, pleading, "I entrust everything to you. Please save my granddaughter." This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. This was the Le Rouge forest that the Baskerville clan had yet to explore. This place harbored many poisonous creatures and plants, bone-sucking mosquitoes, deadly thorny vines, even man-eating spiders and many other dangers. An ordinary person would not survive here for more than an hour. Hence it was also called the life-devouring forest. But now he was swiftly advancing through the forest at an astonishing speed, successively overcoming ambushing creatures, swiftly slicing them into countless pieces with his sword. Witnessing his skilled movements and confident demeanor, Adolf following behind couldn't help but praise his extraordinariness. He wondered if all the children in the Baskerville clan could do this, to which Stafford immediately replied, "Of course not, only a genius like him could accomplish such a feat." The 3 blonde brothers behind were also gazing at him with admiring eyes. While everyone was still lost in thought, he suddenly stopped, having spotted a faint light not far away. It seemed the savages hadn't gone too far. He signaled to Adolf behind that from now on they must be more careful with the leaf-covered areas along the way, as the savages would use the sound of footsteps on the leaves to detect any attackers. As he was explaining this, suddenly, Adolf summoned a spell, saying it would help them move without making any sound. Following his incantation, a semi-transparent aura enveloped everyone's feet. He then announced that from now on, he would personally lead the rescue of Camus and would forever be grateful to his future son-in-law today. Hearing him call him his future son-in-law, he was also utterly surprised. Could it be that Adolf had already acknowledged him? The Balak savages not far away were still unaware of the impending danger. Although the bound Camus kept shouting threats at them, they remained carefree, standing around the campfire, boasting about their hunting achievements. However, some were disappointed at not capturing a good husband. The 2 savage women near Camus still regretted that, as they really liked Vicar and wanted to capture him as a husband. Camus understood a bit of the savage language, so she heard the most about hunting for husbands or capturing wives, and she realized that was the reason they had suddenly launched this attack. At that moment, the savage who had poisoned Camus approached, looking at her with disdain and saying that if they had hunted her, she would belong to all the men of the Balak tribe. Although Camus threatened him in many ways in the imperial language, even telling him to kill her rather than humiliate her like this. She only received increasingly rude treatment, as if about to punish a disobedient slave, because although he didn't understand what she was saying, he could see that she was a defiant person, so he thought he needed to discipline someone as arrogant as her. He intended to humiliate Camus' body. At that moment, a voice interrupted his action. It belonged to the savage girl with immense power. She told him to stay away from Camus, as she was her slave. The interrupted savage angrily argued something with the savage girl, seemingly saying that since he had captured her, she should belong to them. The other girl lowered her voice, scolding him, then said that if she hadn't stopped Vicar, he would have died. So Camus was her spoil of war. Their arguing tone suggested an internal conflict. From their conversation, Camus understood that the girl around her age was the commander of this attack, named Ayin. When the savage angrily pointed at Ayin and said that even as the commander, she couldn't act recklessly, and that since Ayin was a female, what did she need a female slave for? Camus was the wife he had hunted. He wouldn't let it go. The savage girl Ayin immediately exuded a fierce killing intent. Her hands glowed with a silver light. She briefly said, "Hun, if you want to defy me, then face me whenever you want, and I'll show you." Hun, who was furious earlier, immediately changed his expression, flustered and left, while Camus was still amazed that besides Vicar and herself, there was another young genius like Ayin. The girl suddenly kicked Camus. Ayin said in the imperial language that Camus' eyes were as good as her abilities. Indeed, she was someone with good bloodline, the future clan leader of the Morgue family. She said she had been captured as a slave by the Empire but was fortunately rescued from hell. But Camus would not be so lucky. She would torment Camus' soul for a long time, teaching her until licking her toes became Camus' daily habit, engraved in her bones. Before her cruel words ended, a sudden explosion cut her off. In less than 1 second, several savage warriors were burned alive. Simultaneously, a voice like a death sentence rang in everyone's ears. "Die, you savages, I've come to return what you've done." After those words, Adolphe emanated a powerful magic wave, slowly appearing before everyone to Camus' evident joy. Then, to the savages' horror, the Baskerville hunters and 3 blonde brothers joined the rescue. Simultaneously, the Morgue mages launched a fierce attack on them. The battlefield was instantly engulfed in magic light and sword auras. But strangely, the savage warriors offered no resistance, only hastily retreating with caution. Even while retreating, they were warily looking at the flashing swords and magic erupting everywhere. These actions only raised more suspicions. Meanwhile, under Adolphe's command, the warriors fiercely pursued the savages. As they were struggling, he had quietly approached the bound Camus, signaling her to stay silent with his finger. He wasted no time cutting her free. Until then, Camus, still paralyzed, only realized he had come to rescue her. She then excitedly jumped up and shouted his name, giving him a massive headache as he asked if she hadn't seen him signal her to be quiet. But before they could leave, a silver figure charged at them. Ayin suddenly appeared, blocking their path. In broken imperial language, she pointed at him and said, "You skilled swordsman, I knew you'd come. Your fitness helped you find your way quickly. Your intelligence helped you see clearly in the forest's darkness. Your intense love made you risk your life for the girl. I won't ask about your past." Saying that, she slowly smiled, looking at him brightly. "You've met the requirement." Her words left him puzzled, unsure what requirement. On the other hand, Camus seemed to understand upon hearing it. The 2 women's gazes clashed, creating a powerful electric current. Although unaware of their schemes, he had no time to investigate further, because the savage female warrior before him was not someone he could defeat without using his full power. Yet why did he have no impression of her in his previous life? Don't tell me this girl managed to avoid the investigation of Hugo, the archer Balak Night Fox? But this girl seemed too young and unskilled to be her. Or could she share a bloodline with the Night Fox? For a moment, he pondered her identity. Suddenly, after countless life and death battles, he sensed impending danger. He immediately reacted and blocked the poisoned arrow that had attacked Camus earlier. Following the arrow's fall, cries of shock came from behind. It seemed his reaction exceeded the expectations of a Hun, who had launched the sneak attack. Although hesitant about finding and eliminating that vile person, for Camus' safety and his arms. He decided to leave first. He consoled Camus to be patient, promising to take her to Adolphe soon. As he finished speaking, Camus, being carried by him, looked up at him in surprise. Her flushed face was evident, her breathing rapid, even her heartbeat audible to him. Could it be that besides the sedative, she had been infected with another toxin? Although slightly suspicious, he didn't dwell on it, immediately leaving the savage girl Ayan's line of sight while carrying Camus. Perhaps because he ignored her words. Seeing him carry Camus away, Ayan sighed, saying she wanted him to obediently follow her back. Then 2 savage archers shot a few cold arrows, but failed to stop his intentional retreat. After that, he carried Camus and fled again. But the sight of him carrying Camus angered Ayan, making her consider dealing with the morgue brat first. Immediately after, a whistling sound came from behind, and a dazzling arrow shot rapidly towards the Camus in his arms. In an instant, amidst the chaotic rumbling, a giant ice pillar suddenly erupted from the ground, blocking the lethal arrow. It turned out Adolphe had arrived just in time to rescue them. He then breathed a sigh of relief as he took Camus from his arms, summoning complex magic to dispel the paralytic poison in her body. Adolphe said Camus had been heavily poisoned, and even he couldn't completely remove it. When they returned, they should visit the divine Quo Vadis to detoxify her. But before fully recovering, Camus struggled out of Adolphe's arms, turning to hug his neck tightly, excitedly saying, "You saved me again, Vicar." Adolphe stood behind, looking helpless. Though disappointed, he said, "You also tried hard to save her." Camus remained unsatisfied, even pointing at Adolphe and scolding, "Why were you so late? I'll tell Mom when we get home." Before their conversation ended, a noose suddenly flew in from somewhere, tightly gripping his neck. Simultaneously, Ayan's hurried voice rang out, "It's best if you obediently follow me. I don't have time anymore." Judging by her impatient demeanor, she didn't seem to be joking. But as he pondered the meaning of her words, the entire La Rouge forest suddenly awoke. Violently shaking explosions echoed everywhere, accompanied by faint lights and monstrous roars. Witnessing this, Ayan told herself with horror, "Damn, we've been noticed." Simultaneously, the Beelzebub artifact hidden in the veins of his right arm also issued a strong warning. It signaled that something was approaching. In this fierce battle, the usually calm Ayan now seemed soulless, revealing an unprecedented fear. Muttering that she had arrived, the 8-legged lady had arrived. Soon after, they understood why they were so terrified. Because from the darkness, a massive pillar suddenly emerged accompanied by countless screams. The pillar abruptly erupted from the ground, creating a suffocating pressure. To everyone's horror, the pillar suddenly transformed into countless thorny branches, piercing through the entire forest. Adolphe shielded him and Camus behind, disbelieving a monster of this size could hide in the woods. Next, a gigantic spider indescribable with words stared at him like the Grim Reaper. If Vicar remembered correctly, this was the 8-legged lady, the most dangerous S-rank monster. Thanks to countless times wandering amidst enemies in the La Rouge forest in his previous life, he gained much knowledge. He recalled an old native's tale about the legend of the spider monster called the 8-legged lady, lurking deep in the La Rouge forest. A horrifying story. After several revisions, the Empire's books also recorded this monster. It was ranked S-class. Even a matured 8-legged lady could destroy an entire empire, its threat level reaching catastrophic proportions. Now he covered Camus' mouth tightly and whispered, "The monster's eyesight is poor but its hearing and senses are extremely sharp, especially to light and sound." Even Adolphe, the #1 wizard in the world, didn't know this. From the deep darkness, a viscous liquid dripped from the monster's massive body onto the leaves and people's heads. The viscous liquid dripped from multiple locations simultaneously, resembling a drizzle. But when it landed on hair, it instantly corroded whatever it touched, emitting a burning stench. Although the savage warrior quickly cut off the corroded hair, the sound he made horrified Ayan, making her want to eliminate him first. If he wasn't the shaman's grandson, he would have died. Because the savage warrior's terrified scream had attracted the 8-legged lady's attention. Immediately under Ayan's command, the savage warriors silently retreated in small groups. They quickly dispersed, beginning to spread throughout the forest. Meanwhile, the Morgue clan and Baskerville hunters also fled in panic. The two groups differed in their retreat methods, and that difference would determine whom the gigantic spider would pursue. The sound of trees being torn apart echoed throughout the forest, as a massive creature swiftly approached Vikir's group. Although their escape direction was the same as the savages, the sound from behind grew closer. The eight-legged lady considered them the priority prey. As everyone fled in chaos, there were still some reckless fools. A Morgue clan warrior suddenly stepped out, telling everyone that insect monsters like this feared fire magic the most. He then confidently cast what he thought was his strongest spell, believing he could defeat the eight-legged lady. The monster behind immediately exploded violently, releasing a powerful blaze. The fleeing mages also stopped, grinning confidently. But before the smile could fully bloom, one of the spider's legs swiftly pierced through that mage, launching him skyward like a rocket. The spell he considered powerful didn't leave a scratch on the massive creature. Seeing this, Adolf hugged Camus tightly and accelerated his escape. While everyone fled in panic, he suddenly stopped, rushing back the other way, leaving Stafford bewildered by his intentions. He calmly told everyone, "If we continue like this, we'll all be annihilated. So someone needs to act as bait. Let me be the bait then. You think with your skills you can stop that eight-legged spider? We can't let it chase us all the way to our territory. Among those here, he is the most suitable to act as bait. Sir Adolf, there's not much time left. The decision rests with you." Adolf frowned, gritting his teeth to tell the others, "Run quickly. Hurry, don't let my grandson's sacrifice be in vain." Amidst Camus' screams, they gradually disappeared from sight. Once certain they were far away, his hand reaching for his sword hilt stopped. Because he had just been reborn. Why should he care about the destruction of Baskerville territory? Moreover, the ultimate reason was how could his allied forces be a match for this eight-legged lady? It hadn't even revealed its full power yet. After careful thought, he saw the current situation as a great opportunity. If he pretended to be dead, he could escape Hugo's surveillance, even have time to study the Baskerville clan's 10th Fang. Once he had the ability to break free from Hugo's control, or when he completed those skills, able to conceal and control them, he would return to the clan. A rustling sound arose. The eight-legged lady rapidly approached him. If he didn't use his full power, he risked death facing the monster. So he unleashed his concealed full strength. Thanks to the power boost from the river Styx, the Baskerville clan's powerful swordsmanship skills, even the legendary demonic sword Beelzebub, as his attack was about to land, the eight-legged lady let out a horrifying scream of pain. Following the agonizing cry, from deep in the forest, a blinding light like a massive sun shone down. Though Adolf only focused on running forward and didn't see the scene behind, Camus, whom he carried on his shoulder, clearly witnessed the massive change. She froze, then burst into tears and screamed. He gradually lost consciousness. As his consciousness battled the monster, the sight before him brought back the heartache, the unforgettable wound from his previous life. He was on the execution stand. Hugo led the Baskerville clan's hunting